Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this board meeting of Tampa Bay Water for Monday, May 20th. Can we please begin with a roll call?
Commissioner Cohen,
Here.
Councilmember Hanowitz,
Here.
Mayor Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Eggers,
Here.
Commissioner Mariano,
Here.
Councilman Miranda,
Here.
Commissioner Oakley,
Here.
Commissioner Scott,
Here.
Commissioner Woostel.
Here.
Mr. Chair, all members are present.
Thank you very much. This meeting was noticed on the Florida Administrative Register and on the Tampa Bay Water website. The meeting is available for viewing through live streaming, and a recording of the meeting will be posted on the agency's website. I would like to ask Vice Chair Lizette Hanowitz to please lead us at this time in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, well, we're going to begin this morning with our fiscal year 2025 budget public hearing. And at this time, I would like to ask Mr. Carden to take us through that process.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Today, we will present the budget hearing. We did present this last month to you in workshop format, and our Chief Financial Officer, Christina Sackett, walked you through, so she's going to give you the highlights of what we showed you, and then I think she's going to present some alternatives that you suggested to bring back. Christina.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. This presentation will recap the proposed fiscal year 25 operating budget that was presented at the April workshop and provide an alternative fiscal year 25 operating budget as requested by the board during the workshop, plus give a review of the planned fiscal year 2025 capital improvements program expenditures. Board action will be requested after the presentation and public comment. Some of the key factors impacting the development of the proposed fiscal year 25 budget include the forecasted water demand, alignment with the agency's strategic plan, inflation impact on costs, rate stabilization funds, upcoming large capital projects, future funding needs, and balancing these factors with minimizing the impact on the fiscal year net revenue required from water sales and impacts on future budgets. The projected demand for fiscal year 25 is 209.7 million gallons per day and will be supplied with an annual average of 77.7 million gallons per day from surface water, 12 million gallons per day from seawater, and 120 million gallons per day from groundwater. The proposed uniform rate for fiscal year 25 is slightly above $2.63 per thousand gallons, which is an increase of a little more than 3 cents from the current fiscal year, and includes a variable rate around 59 cents per thousand gallons. The proposed budget does not include any rate stabilization funds, but instead aims to maintain the funds for use in the future fiscal years to mitigate increased debt service payments. Currently, there is about $29 million in the rate stabilization account. The agency's total costs to provide quality water to the member governments consists of two components, fixed costs and variable costs. The agency's variable costs fluctuate annually depending on the projected demand and supply source. In fiscal year 25, the variable costs equal about 21% of the total anticipated costs. The fixed costs account for the remaining 79% and consist of three subcomponents with committed costs: the contracted operations and maintenance agreements, the debt service for member acquisition credits, and the debt service for bonds. The fourth subcomponent is the fixed cost to operate the agency. As you can see, debt service makes up about 39% of the fiscal year 25 total costs. This percentage has decreased over the past few years, but with large upcoming projects, the percentage of debt service will grow. The total costs for the proposed fiscal year 25 budget are $212.9 million, which is about a $13.4 million increase over the current fiscal year, largely due to an increase in the variable costs of $8.4 million. Listed here is a breakdown of costs by category. The proposed budget does include a 3% cost of living adjustment, a performance-based merit program of up to 3%, and the request for 3 positions, 2 safety technicians and 1 purchasing specialist. All 3 of these positions will be bringing services in-house instead of doing services out contracted, and save the agency about $500,000 a year. The projected adjustments of $11.5 million are netted against the total costs of $212.9 million to get the proposed net revenue required from water sales of $201.5 million. This pie chart shows the breakdown of each division's percentage of the proposed fiscal year 25 total costs. The budgets for the Water Production Division and the Finance and Administration Division account for 81% of total costs. This is because the Water Production Division includes the variable costs and the contracted operations and maintenance agreements for the surface water treatment plant and the desalination facility, and the Finance and Administration Division includes the agency's debt service. During the April budget workshop, the board requested an alternative budget that considered using rate stabilization funds to reduce the increase of the proposed uniform rate be presented for consideration. The following slides will provide the alternative budget cost by category and adjustments and give details on the variances. The total cost for the alternative fiscal year 2025 budget listed here by category are $212.6 million. This is lower than the proposed budget by $345,000, and the reductions are in the bolded categories. The alternative budget also includes using $766.5 from the rate stabilization account and brings the projected adjustments to $12.2 million. These are netted against the lower total cost to get the net revenue required from water sales of $200.4 million. To help meet the board's request to lower the proposed 25 uniform rate, staff revisited the proposed fixed costs to find any possible reductions. In professional services, staff identified some current multi-year tasks that will carry into fiscal year 25 and push the next phase out, so we were able to reduce the fiscal year 25 budget. In repairs and other services, the budget for the demand management media was removed. If additional water shortage advertising is needed, we will find the funding in fiscal year 25. And in capital expenditures, it was determined a project could be delayed until fiscal year 26, and that a requested vehicle could be removed because the circumstance for the vehicle changed and it was no longer needed. The alternative budget also includes using $766.5 from the rate stabilization account, which equals about 1 penny on the rate. Overall, this is a total reduction of $1.1 million from the proposed net revenue required. These reductions bring the alternative fiscal year 25 uniform rate to slightly below $2.62 per thousand gallons, which is an increase of a little less than 2 cents from the current fiscal year and is about half of the increase of the proposed uniform rate. It also includes a variable rate around 59 cents per thousand gallons and uses funds from the rate stabilization account, which will bring the account balance to about $28.2 million. Next, I will provide a review of the fiscal year 25 capital improvements program plan. The fiscal year 25 capital improvements program expenditures total $174.3 million, with project activity ranging from planning to closeout. 2 projects account for 69% of the planned fiscal year expenditures. The South Hillsborough Pipeline accounts for 32% of the total, with expenditures of $56.1 million, and the surface water treatment plant expansion has expenditures of $64.5 million, accounting for 37% of the total expenditures. There are 9 projects with expenditures over $1 million, each that account for 25% of the total, and the remaining 6% is for 24 projects with expenditures of less than $1 million each. This shows the planned funding for the 25 capital improvement program expenditures. 12% will be funded with pay-as-you-go type funds, such as the renewal and replacement, capital improvement, released debt service, and uniform rate. 18% will be funded with member government joint project agreements, and 70% will be funded with revenue bonds, 38% from existing bonds, and 32% from the upcoming new issuance. More details regarding the upcoming debt issuance will be presented to the board in Agenda Item D4. Plus, the agency is anticipating receiving about $5 million in reimbursements through grants and district co-funding during the fiscal year. Here is a review of the highlights of the proposed and the alternative budget. Anticipated demand of 209.7 is the same for both budgets, as well as staffing and fiscal year 25 capital improvement program expenditures. The variance is in the budget total costs, rate stabilization use, and the net revenue required from water sales that result in the variance in the uniform rate. The proposed uniform rates budget is $2.6322 per thousand gallons, and the alternative budget's uniform rate is 2.6177 per thousand gallons. For today's public hearing, the remaining budget actions include receiving any public comment on the proposed fiscal year 25 budget or capital improvement program, and approving Resolution 2024-001, which approves the 25 operating budget, including any amendments to the budget by the board, and approving the capital improvement program expenditures for fiscal year 25. This does conclude my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Yes. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few slides back, when you were talking about the alternative budget, you said there was a $100,000 reduction from a project that was going to be postponed until the following
26.
fiscal year. What project was that?
It's remodeling of the lab bathrooms at the Cypress Creek facility.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mariano.
Thank you. I'm glad to see the board's conversation last meeting talked about the rate stabilization funds to use it. In years past, how much have we used?
For the past few years, we have not used anything out of the rate stabilization. It has fluctuated previous to that. We've used anywhere from $2 million up to, I think the highest that we ever used was about 6 or 7. But we are anticipating with some of the upcoming debt that the agency will have to take on, then in fiscal years 28 through 31, we could be seeing a big increase in our debt service. So we're planning on using it to help offset those increases in those years. So the uniform rate doesn't go up and down, just kind of maintains.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Westall.
Can you tell me what accounts for the variable rate increasing by almost 16%?
The largest piece of it is the fact that in fiscal year 24, we budgeted the desal facility at 4 million gallons per day. And in fiscal year 25, we're budgeting it at 12.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Akers.
Good morning. Thank you, as always. A lot of numbers flying around. I'm glad we do our homework a little bit, so this doesn't sound like Greek. Anyway, appreciate all the work. Appreciate the alternative. Just what's creating this rate stabilization fund? What adds to it?
When we get to the end of the fiscal year, when we have monies that are unencumbered, we will usually request to the board to either transfer it into some of the pay-as-you-go funds, the capital improvement R&R, or to put it into the rate stabilization account.
And would you have a sense, like in the last 3 or 4 years, what that increase has been?
Last year, I think it did increase by about $2 million. Previous to that, again, it fluctuates anywhere. We've been focusing more on putting it into capital improvement. So it's been fluctuating more around the $500,000 to maybe $2.5 million.
Okay. Thank you. And then you talked about it being used to offset future debt, potentially. So just to capture that amount, that debt that you're talking about, that this would be used against, what would that amount be roughly that we're talking about? What's the new debt? And then what's the annualized piece that this would go towards?
So for an example, the $420 million that we are looking at and will be presented in D4, you are looking at interest of roughly around $21 million alone per fiscal year. So we would want to use some of the rate stabilization account to help offset that, so the increase isn't quite so large in those fiscal years.
So those are the years for sure that you wouldn't be adding to this rate stabilization fund.
That
But
we
you
would,
might actually, you've been adding the last few years. You probably wouldn't be adding, you might be using some.
correct. But again, if we end up at the end of the fiscal year with unencumbered funds that weren't spent, then we would take that opportunity to put it into rate stabilization to help.
To move it right over instead of
Correct.
increasing the stabilization.
Correct.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about the salary increases. Seems to me that the 3% is what, well, I'll just speak for our county, for the last number of years, not this year, but coming into this year and not next year, but we've been at 3% increase. And this past year, we bumped it a little bit to try to stave off, I guess, some of the competition out there, whether it's private sector or government sector. There's another 3% you have set aside for merit. It seems like this year we're using almost two and a half
Correct.
of the 3%. So for me, again, I'm trying to understand merit systems, but it's always been, well, there's some that don't deserve any, maybe even a cut, some deserve more, so it kind of balances out. And you end up somewhere, I don't know, maybe half or maybe a little bit less. What's driving the increase this year, more so than, I guess, the previous year where we used about 1%?
What's driving that? So
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. So in fiscal year '23, the average merit was about 1.89, and then this year it's about 2.5. I think it's partially because we have employees that have been here, obviously, an extra year. We do have some change in some of the manager levels that maybe score a little differently than some of the previous ones. And I think it's just that employees are showing their dedication and really stepping up.
I do. I really appreciate that for sure. I perhaps maybe we can, one of our future meetings, kind of take a look at that, that the merit system itself. I mean, I'd almost rather just do a 4.5% increase and not do merit if it's really just going to be everybody getting. And I'm not saying everybody's getting it, but I'd be curious to see out of the 150 some employees, how many are getting that 3%. But anyway, I appreciate again all the work you've gone into this. I do think we ought to periodically challenge staff with a little bit of that take back on the rate stabilization, and I would certainly lean towards that alternative. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Scott, you wanted to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with fiscal year 2024, basically about 2/3 behind us now, are we anticipating unencumbered funds at year end that we would be moving over to rate stabilization?
We will likely have unencumbered funds at the end of the fiscal year. It's still really too early because even though it's the middle of May, a lot of our invoices have like a couple month delay. So what we usually do is in September, we bring it back to the board with what we think we're going to end up the year with, and that's when we'll ask for approval to put it into rate stabilization.
Okay, so potentially there could be $500,000 or $1 million that we would move over into
Correct.
rates. Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Westall.
Thank you. Just piggybacking off of what Commissioner Eggers brought up about the rate stabilization fund, and maybe this is a question for Chuck, I don't know, but is there a policy of, is there a certain level of percentage that you say, hey, we're okay, we have excess? Is there a threshold that determines this rate stabilization fund? Like, how does it work?
There's not per se a policy. There has been board discussion to have a minimum. I think it's 20 million. It's in one of our items for on the reserve. So the board has recommended a guidance number. And so a few years ago, I brought this to the board about an upcoming debt service in 27, 28 that we're going to need to take care of. It's going to spike the rates. So we made a concerted effort not to use it, to leave it alone, and for the 27, 28, and in that time frame. In 2032, a lot of the debt service goes away. And so this is to bridge it until we get to that, and we're going to be adding debt. My goal was to always have the rate be in some linear fashion, not going up and then coming back down and looking like an EKG readout. I wanted it to be, relatively flat. It will be going up, or, it's not going to be a level. It is going up as we need to provide, new water sources and projects. But that was the plan, looking ahead to plan it out so that we didn't have a surprise in about 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Okay, yeah, I'm not suggesting I'm against, I'm just wondering and making sure that if we have a reserve fund, but then this is outside of that reserve fund, and I just like to challenge and make sure that we don't have tons of cash sitting around collecting dust, especially when we're talking about record high inflation and depreciation of the value of money. So, okay, all right, thank you.
Were there Commissioner Mariano and then Commissioner Eggers? I'll come back to you.
With the rate stabilization fund is a good way to stabilize the rates. I get that. And I know when I was here before in Tampa Bay Water, we had used it a few times to keep the rates when things were starting to climb and the economy was dropping. What is our overall, let's say, reserve balance on all of our accounts? Are we close to like the 16-7%, or what's the number we're at?
So in the rate stabilization, we have 29 million, Christine has announced. And so we try to keep a balance of 20. We also have an R&R reserve, and we have 23 million in that. And then we have a utility reserve that we're required to put 20 million in, and it is at 32 million. And so all these other reserves are in that same strategy to handle the increased debt in 27, 28. I plan to use all of those reserves to keep the rate at a manageable level.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, so we have projects on the capital side that you listed, and I thought we had already issued some bonds for these projects.
We had issued bonds in 2022. We issued about 130 million to get us started on the contracts. But the surface water treatment plant and the Hillsborough pipeline, they are large contracts, so we need to issue more to be able to do the next contracts, the GMPs that we're looking to issue.
So this will just be added on to the previous debt that got us started on these projects?
Correct.
Okay, so you just layer it as we need it?
Yes.
And how are the rates looking as we go this year? Is they starting to come down any, or are they still on the upwards for the bonding?
They're kind of starting to go down a little bit, but in D4, our financial advisors will be on to definitely present more of that information to you.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I just want to be clear about the arithmetic that we're talking about here. If we use rate stabilization funds, we're talking about $700,000 or so that will buy us about, instead of having a rate that's going to go up about 3 cents a month, it'll go up about 1.8 cents a month. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so that's really the question at
Between-
the end of the day.
Between using the rate stabilization, the 766 and the 345,000 in budget cuts, yes. Instead of having a 3 cent increase, we'll have a 0.18 increase.
And just customarily, you try to keep the rate from fluctuating. You're trying to keep it as stable as possible. How much does it usually go up per year? It's using the 3 cent, 1.8 cent scale.
In the past couple of years, it's gone up roughly about 1%. Previous to that, with the previous general manager, we used more of the rate stabilization account and the uniform rate maintained for a 10-year period of time.
Okay. Anyone else?
Just one last.
Commissioner Eggers,
Yeah, I think the only other comment that I would make is that, and I think Commissioner Wastel referred to the issues that are, again, our residents face on the inflationary front. I know last year I was trying to get a millage rate reduction and couldn't get the support that I needed because it really wasn't that much money. It seems like every time I go up against this, it's never that much money. And I just think that these increases do flow through to our utility staff. Our utility staffs have their own capital budgets. They have their own operating increases. And to the extent that we can relieve just a little bit of pressure, I think is a good thing. I think sounds to me like that there's a possibility that we'll fill it back up at the end of the year with the excess funds anyway. So I definitely think it's a good signal to say, hey, we're just going to try to ease off on these increases. Though I understand and I appreciate the general manager and what he's trying to do. The previous one went too far, I think. And this one, I think this general manager has tried to be a little bit more fiscally careful for the agency, which I appreciate. So somewhere in between, and this year I support this alternative. So again, thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. That was a very good discussion. In asking the question, I was just simply putting the numbers out there. I'm actually, I think this is a very modest and conservative proposal. So either way the board wants to go on it, I would certainly be comfortable with. At this time, if there's no more board discussion, we are going to go ahead and take public comment. This portion of public comment is only on the budget. So if you would like to speak, we have 3 minutes per speaker available, but only about the budget. Sure.
Hi, good morning. David Ballard Geddes Jr. I live on Georgia Avenue in Palm Harbor. I do have a quick question about the legalities of taxation. Is it legal to tax our vital water supply or to indirectly toll charge our access to our essential water supply needs? It seems to me that a debt service of $73 million in the budget is substantial. In regards to inflation, what can we, in practical terms, what can we expect as a forecasted debt service regarding the bond debt 5 years, 10 years down the road from now as our current course of inflation is on today? How much of the debt service benefits domestic investors? How much of the debt service is servicing foreign investors as based on statute 218.415, section 16F? I have an issue with foreign investors taking control and having power of domestic resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if there is no more public comment, I'm going to close the public hearing. And at this time, we can entertain a motion on the fiscal year 2025 budget. Is there any additional discussion?
I move that we support the alternative that was presented today based on the board's requests from the last meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
The Kentucky Derby, right?
All right, seeing none, can we please have a vote?
Mr. Chair, we have vote of 8-1. The motion passed.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we are going to move on to our regular board meeting, and we're going to start with our public comment. I have one person signed up, and that is David Ballard Geddes Jr. Sir, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Again, David Ballard Geddes Jr. I live on Georgia Avenue in Palm Harbor. This drawing represents how Almighty God replenishes the aquifer. He uses rainfall to fill the wetlands. In turn, the water from the wetlands percolates through the soil horizons, aerobically filtering the water, purifying the water as it enters the aquifer, replenishing the aquifer naturally. In contrast, the practice of man's artificial attempts at weather modification, coupled with the direct injecting of reclaimed water into the aquifer, bypasses the ecostructure divinely created and established by Almighty God. The reclaimed water is a mixture of nitrate compounds that have been filtered and temporarily held in suspension through the use of chemicals such as chlorine. The chlorinated nitrate compounds injected directly or indirectly into the aquifer through the SHARP or the TAP program are intended to destabilize the pH balance of the aquifer, molesting, contaminating, and ultimately destroying the groundwater supply. When in the course of human events, audaciously, the Declaration of Independence states that our current government is here to harass us. The Declaration states this government is here to eat us out of our subsistence. It declares to place us on a long train of usurpations, declaring that mankind is more disposed to suffer. It declares to create new offices of perfidy and destruction, to swarm, to ravage, all the while such evil is declaring itself to be divine and provident, declaring itself again to be a God, nature's God in the Declaration of Independence, assuming to have powers of the earth in its abuse and destruction of the ecosystem, an ecostructure born by Almighty God. It will soon be self-evident on its face. This declaration before us, serving our Constitution today, this nature's God is made of pride and sacrilege. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment? If not, we are going to move on to our consent agenda. Before we move with that, though, the general manager wanted to discuss items A5 and A6 before we vote.
Yes, thank you. A5 is something I wanted to present to the board as a good thing with the educating of the young folks in the area. It is for a sponsorship for the Great Exploration Children's Museum. It's a 5-year sponsorship for $250,000, so it's $50,000 a year. The exhibit, we will be working, if the board approves this item, with the museum, and I think the theme will be centered around hydroponics, geared toward the younger audiences. We do currently do educational exhibits at other museums in the area, in the Tri-County region. So this is in St. Petersburg, so I'm happy to present this item to you.
And I think you wanted to mention A6 as
Yeah,
well.
A6 is the property acquisition policy that is attached. We currently have guidelines for our property acquisition that have not been updated since, I believe, 2014. But it allows me as the general manager to sign off on property easements, temporary easements, fee simple, up to $100,000. With the South Central Hillsborough pipeline project coming right at us here, it's going to be very aggressive, and we will be out doing property. So the item primarily states to allow me $400,000 signature delegation for this. We have analyzed the properties that we need, and a majority of them are under the $400,000. The policy does state that I will bring back to the board any of those that I did sign at the very next board meeting for ratification after the fact. And I will be providing a report to the board every month showing where are we with how we did versus what our estimates were for each parcel. So that's A6.
Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, so this will just be for these CIP projects that are ongoing for the South
It's,
Hillsborough Pipeline?
it's currently not written that way. It's pretty broad. It could be for any properties. But the reasoning for this really was spurred by that one project, the South Central Hillsborough Pipeline.
Okay. Well, I would certainly be supportive of, as it relates to, excuse me, sorry about that, as it relates to this CIP project. And the two large ones, I don't think probably the surface water one will require this, but I would support this move on this project, and then support moving it from 100 to 200 as a general policy. So that would be my comments on that. And then before we move on off of this topic, I'd like to look at A13 as well, but we can do that after.
Okay, we'll come back to A13. Commissioner Wustel and then Councilwoman Hanowitz.
Thank you, Chair. I need to check and see if Commissioner Eggers has access to my phone calls, because I was the one that asked for this one to be pulled. I believe that and on this type of policy, while we might trust the current general manager and we're all involved in altering the policy, I believe that the amount $400,000 can be something that kind of moves out of sight, out of mind down the road if we don't have some type of reverter clause that says, hey, once these projects are done, or if you want to restrict them to the certain CIP projects that are in the pipeline right now, I would understand, but a blanket $400,000 is not something, and that's why I wanted it ripped from consent to have different considerations. Probably $100,000 is too low. I do understand the need for expedience, and I know that the way that the attorneys work in this field of getting acquisition of these properties, I understand that it can be turned into quite a racket, but I don't support $400,000 as a blanket non-expiration policy. So if I don't know how we pull things here, I don't know what Tampa Bay
We
Water
can
is.
procedurally deal with it. We'll deal with it right now. We'll entertain a motion after consent to deal with this item.
Okay, so those are my comments on this item.
Councilwoman Hanowitz.
Thank you. So I also had similar concerns. When I looked at it, I noticed that there was no time frame, so it was very broad. And so you can either have a time limit or maybe limit it by project. And what I was thinking, okay, well, maybe we limit it to this project and then look at whether or not we need to increase the 100K, because I do agree that may be too low. I wouldn't just want to come up with a number arbitrarily without understanding what that number should be, frankly. But I would be comfortable limiting it either to this project, frankly, and then having a conversation as to whether we should lift that limit a little higher. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman,
Eckley.
how many projects are you talking about under the 400,000? Because it sounds like it's more than one property. Are we talking about 2 or 3, or was it 2 or 3 times 400,000?
There's a couple, there's 2 segments, A and B, on this pipeline. There's a couple hundred that we need to acquire. I believe there's 10 that are very large in price, above the 400, but the majority is below the 400,000, except for 10 or 11 of them is what I remember.
So this signature would cover those that are under the 400,000?
Yes, sir.
And I understand how you do these things and move things forward and all of that. Seems like there's a lot of money for, that signature. And I know you come back and ratify it, but if you approved it, we wouldn't want to come back and go against what you've actually done, because I trust what you do. But just of interest of how much money it'd be, and the fact that that seems like a lot of money.
Yeah, the one thing I didn't mention in the policy, anything over 100,000 requires an appraisal. So it wouldn't be just a negotiation from my staff with the property owners. It would be an appraisal.
Appraisals included?
Yes, sir. Over 100,000.
All right.
Okay. Commissioner Scott and then Commissioner Eggers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had requested a list of what potential properties we were looking at, and there's 2 segments here. So segment A contains 189 parcels that were between 185 of those was between $800 to $400,000. The max was $820,350. And then in segment B, we were talking about, hold on one sec here, 47 parcels, 45 of which were between 4,500 and 400,000, and the max was 945,000. So just to put it into perspective of what we're talking about here.
Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, just one question. Chuck, when we were estimating the cost of these projects, when we chose this project, did we not have some dollars built into land acquisition?
Yes, sir, we have estimated for both of the segments how much we think we'll need for the property.
So some of these numbers that Commissioner Scott just said, went through, we've got covered in an estimate that we did prior to voting this project in as our choice.
Yes, sir. Roughly around 11 million for segment A and 6 or 7 million, I think, for segment B is their estimates. And they're broken down by each parcel.
Okay. So these numbers that Commissioner Scott just read, it included that, these numbers that you just said. So some of this additional is above and beyond what you were expecting? Or is this just to finalize the purchase that we've already estimated?
Yeah, we're still in the estimate, and we think our estimates are good still.
So this is to actually just trigger the purchase itself,
Yep,
even though it's already been figured into the price?
Right. We are actually going out and mailing letters, and we're talking to folks on our route.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mariano and then Councilman Miranda.
Chuck, how much time do you think you'll need to be able to finish with this project and all the acquisitions?
Well, we are scheduled to bring the pipeline on by the 2028 timeframe, and I believe we will make that deadline. This will be, I don't know the exact, maybe Maribel Medina will tell you the phase of property acquisition, how much of time we've allotted in our CIP project.
Hi, good morning. I'm Maribel Medina, Planning and Projects Director. So the timeline for property acquisition, we are in the stage what we call the friendly voluntary property acquisition. And we are already had mail letters to all the affected owners of the parcels. We anticipate completing the initial settlement offers by September this year. And anything beyond, at that point, we will be coming back to the board for a resolution for a potential eminent domain on parcels that we can't settle. Then the plan is to complete property acquisition by the end of 2025 and be ready to submit the permits needed for the project.
So I'd be comfortable setting a timeline up to give them December of 2025 then.
Okay, Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just sitting here listening. When you look at cost of property today, it's not going to go down tomorrow in this area. So I understand what you're talking about, the funds, but if you don't secure these properties, and when you have all your due diligence done, make sure you're getting it the right price. You won't get that same price tomorrow. That's all I'm going to say.
So I think at this time, it would be my suggestion that we dispose of A6 with a motion if somebody would like to put something forward and perhaps modify the proposal that's on the table.
Can I make a recommendation?
Yes, please.
So if the desire is to add an automatic termination, then you can do that today. It would just add an additional section 6 that this policy shall automatically terminate on, and then whatever date you also choose, and then we can calendar it internally so that we can make sure we bring it back, whether it's a new policy back to a 200,000 or 100,000 standpoint, or to continue this policy on further if the acquisition process is not yet complete.
I would like, I'm good with that. I'd just like it to make it project specific to this South Hillsborough pipeline, A or B.
Could you make that a motion?
Yeah, so we move that, that this policy to 400,000, adjusted from 100 to 400,000 be with respect to the South Hillsborough pipeline, section A or B, and that it terminate on December 31st of 2025. If they need extension to come back before that, but that would be just for that increase. And I think to Councilwoman Hanowitz's question about bumping that 100,000 up, I would be interested in looking at that sooner rather than later, just to see if for other projects and just a standard level, but let's not include that in this motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Wessel?
I just want to make sure if we're restricting it to only the pipeline, do you feel like there's also properties for the surface water treatment plant? Didn't you suggest that? Or is it only the properties that you're having the challenges on or on the pipeline?
This is specifically for the pipeline.
Okay, then I'll support the motion. Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? All right, all those in favor of the well, here, I think, are we gonna, here we go. Oh, okay. I think we need something to vote on here for A6, or we can do a voice vote. What would? Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, for some reason, it's not taking my change.
Should we go ahead and have a voice vote on that? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Commissioner Eggers, you wanted to speak about item A13.
Yeah, just real quickly, thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a 30% design coming in May or June, somewhere in this time frame. The 30% level will have been reached on the surface water treatment plant. We had an original estimate. It'll be adjusted somewhat based on that design. I'm assuming at 60 to 70%, there'll be another adjustment to the price, whether it's up or down. Let's keep our fingers crossed. When does the bonding occur? When do we start to think about the bonding for this? I know it's, you need them for the construction process, but when do we start to seriously hone in on that?
Well, the $420 million bond issuance that we're going to talk about in D4 has a good chunk of money for this project. So we're talking September, August, October timeframe to borrow the money. And we will immediately, probably early in the spring next year, start spending it.
And that 60 to 70%, you feel pretty good about the project cost at that time?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Go ahead. Move approval of the rest of the consent.
Second.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, if we see if our system is working. Yeah, here we go. Please record your vote.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. We are going to move on now to our regular agenda. The first item will be the general manager report from Mr. Carden.
Thank you. First thing I would like to talk about is the 2024 hurricane season. So we are about 2 weeks away from the official start, which is June 1st. We have been updating our what we call our Water Emergency Incident Command System. We have shared that around to staff and updated any changes. It includes checklist, preparations, not only for work here, but also family preparations for our workers. We also have been working with the district and TICO, looking at some memorandum of understandings for maybe working together in times of emergency for some space to those entities. Also, Commissioner Catherine Starkey from Pasco County contacted me several weeks ago and has invited our staff to tour the AmSkills Incorporated organization up in Pasco. And what they do is provide local high schools job boot camps, training classes, pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships for workers in the area, including utilities. And so I'm very interested in going there with our staff to see how they could how we could benefit from their initiatives and their programs there at AmSkills.
Chuck?
Yes.
Real quickly, on that issue, and I think that's a really good one. I had the opportunity to go down to Lellman, which is where the AmSkills in Pinellas County houses themselves, and went listened to the results of their boot camp process. one of our vendors is actually going to be start participating in that process. So they'll go through a 2 or 3 week training. The eventual company that hires them will do more training, but they come out at the end, do their graduation, and then interview. 4 or 5 companies will interview that class. It could be 15 to 25 people, and they are getting people from it. I mean, Jabil goes there. Like I said, one of our vendors is going there. So I think it would be good to even look at the one in Lellman as well. So both of those would potentially have future employees for Tampa Bay Water. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Also, last month I had the pleasure of going down to the Peace River, Minnesota Water Supply. They hosted all of the regional water suppliers. It was the second meeting that we had. We hosted the first one. So Peace River hosted us last month, and Polk County, their water cooperative is up next in October. So, it's a very good roundtable discussion of all of the regional providers, and we share information, and we have similar challenges, but we also can help each other. Also, the DSAL, I wanted to update the board on the progress we are making there. You did see some photos. We've taken all the racks out, as they say, and all the vessels. They are currently bringing in the skids, the new supports. They are on site, and they are assembling the first rack. There are 7 what they call trains that push water through. So rack number 1 is being put together now, and the membrane, the tubes that hold them, they're being delivered on site. We are still scheduled for production the first week of October to bring out 12 million gallons a day, and then the rest of it will be at the end of the year, up to the full max. October, first week is still on schedule. And then next, I'd like to show you some photos of some outreach we've done. This is picture sponsored. We sponsored an exhibit at EcoFest, which was organized by the Learning Gate Community School and MOSI. That was on April 20th. And so we had a lot of Tampa Bay Water staff, you can see in the pictures there. And we had a lot of people stop by and see us. The next collection of pictures, we started up in the top left. The Tampa Bay kayak anglers held their first cleanup on the Hillsborough River as part of some source water protection, many grant monies that we gave them last year. We also exhibited at Keep Pasco Beautiful's Earth Day event at Cruz Lake. We also exhibited at the Geo Expo at the University of South Florida. And we hosted an educational field trip with, you see the school children there from the Learning Gate Community School at our Cypress Creek well field. Also, this month I presented at the Florida Water Environment Association W3 committee seminar, and that's in the top left. Paul Stanek, who is your chief operating officer, presented to the Dunedin Rotary. And then Turasu Asefa, he is our system decision support manager. He presented on water resources and climate change. And then lastly, Amelia Brown, who is the demand management program manager. She presented on indoor and outdoor water conservation during a Greenway Health webinar. And then lastly, we had Steve Fleischacker from our agency, along with Brandon Moore, and the city of Tampa, Sarah Burns. They were interviewed at a radio station, WMNF. They have a program called Midpoint. And so as the PFAS regulations came out, we had these 3 individuals did a radio show and answered a bunch of questions. They did a great job. So that's the report for outreach. And now I think it's turned, Warren's going to show us the supply and demand.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. I have a brief summary for you this morning about the status of our regional conditions, supply and demand. We did enjoy about normal rainfall from November through March, which was a welcome change after last year. We did receive only about 1.5 inches of rain in April, about an inch below what we normally would receive. And so far for the month of May, we've averaged 1.2 inches. That was through about the middle of last week. Long-term average is 2.4, so we're about halfway where we should be for the month of May. Our spring dry season should be concluding soon. The rainy season usually will begin in late May or early June. Last month, I was happy to present a map that showed almost no shading, only up in the panhandle, but things can change in a month. The abnormally dry to drought, moderate drought conditions have returned, mostly to our south and our east. The only part of abnormally dry is encroaching into southeastern Hillsborough County. If we do get into our normal summer rainy pattern, this should recede fairly quickly once we get those sustained heavy afternoon rains. Our region remains in a stage 1 water shortage condition, but we have seen a lot of improvement in the recent months. In the last 12 months, our regional rainfall deficit is 1.9 inches, shown on the top graph, and the Hillsborough River flow for the last year is now at a 4 million gallon per day surplus, so we've come out of a deficit condition on river flow. The blue bars on the top and bottom graphs show how we get out of this water shortage condition. The pink bars show how we got into it. We have to meet 2 conditions to get out of this. We're currently meeting the river flow condition, but we need for the rainfall surplus to be 0 or a positive surplus before we exit. If we can get sustained summer rains, hopefully this will recede also in the next couple of months. For the first 7 months of the year, we delivered an average of 197.28 million gallons per day. It's about 1.3% higher than the first 7 months of last year, but things could have looked a whole lot different. The first month, October, 1st of November, demands were extremely high, but the cooler weather, some rainfall, the 1-day-a-week restriction, conservation messaging, and enforcement have all helped to bring demands back to where they should be, and that was a very concerted effort from all involved. We are currently augmenting the Hillsborough River from their Tampa Bypass Canal. That's to sustain that river flow for the city of Tampa. We've been augmenting about 25 to 40 million gallons per day, as we typically do each spring. If we get good river flow in the summer, we can reverse that, and flow from the Hillsborough River can be moved into the bypass canal for our regional use and storage. Tampa is currently not purchasing water from Tampa Bay Water, but they could begin later this month until the summer rains begin. There are 2 regional conditions that we're currently still managing for our regional supplies. The first is the desalination facility, as Mr. Cardin mentioned. It is offline until early fall. And the second is the regional reservoir storage volume. This graph shows 2 pieces of information. In blue, it shows the volume of water stored in the reservoir at the beginning of each month. The orange line is what we projected we would be at the beginning of the year for each month. There was a very wide difference as we went through the fall and spring because we were using a lot of water from the reservoir to sustain our surface water treatment plant flow and to bring down the pumping rate of the consolidated permit well fields. We are now approaching, at the beginning of May, the reservoir stored volume is about where we thought it would be this time of year. For January through April, we essentially held the line with what we had in the reservoir based on that rainfall and river flow condition. So things are looking about where we expected, which is much better than we were a few months ago. The consolidated permit well fields, the green line shows our permit limit of 90 million gallons per day. The blue line is our 12-month running average production. Red bars are the actual monthly production from the well fields, going back to October of 22. And the 1 yellow bar is what we expected for the month of May of this year. Good news, our running average is 86.9 million gallons per day at the end of April. And if you notice the yellow bar for this month, it's higher than it was May of last year, which doesn't seem to make sense because we're under 1 day a week restrictions. But it's all in how we're operating our system. Last year, to keep production low from the well fields, we were running surface water at about 85 to 90. This year, it's only 60. But the bar isn't that much higher. That continues to attest to how effective the 1 day a week watering restrictions have been. We are continuing now to conserve our storage in the regional reservoir to make sure that we meet your demands all the way through the spring dry season into the summer. And we have managed our interconnected sources to remain in compliance with our permit. As we look for the fiscal year, we now project that we will remain in compliance with our well fields through the end of the year. The 1 day a week watering restrictions and enforcement, all the conservation messaging, and our climate benefits have all helped us get through this condition together. The district has asked us if we know of any members that are considering keeping the 1 day a week restrictions after they expire on July the 1st. And we're not only making operational choices now to meet your demands, we're looking forward to next year, because the decisions that we make today on what sources, we have to make sure we understand those implications in the next year so we can continue to stay in compliance with our permits. I'll wrap up this morning with a quick summary on South Hillsborough County. First, I will note we are following up with a permit application to incorporate the water that we are acquiring from Suburban Land Reserve onto our AgMart permit, our Balm Farm permit. We're answering a few questions from the district, not on that acquisition, but the conversion of the water from agriculture to potable supply on that well field. We should answer those questions in the next 2-3 weeks and still expect that permit to be issued later this summer or fall. Demands in South Hillsborough County are met through 3 locations. The green part of each bar is what we send from the region to Lithia through now the permanent Brandon Booster Station. The yellow part of each bar is what we have sent each month through the central point of connection, and the dark blue bar at the top is what we took from the South Central well field. The average demand in the service area was 56.9 million gallons per day as of the end of April, which is about 2.1 million a day higher than it was a year ago. I would like to point out the 4 bars that represent the months of November through March. These are very low compared to historical numbers, and this was because of the cooler, wetter weather, 1 day a week restrictions, enforcement, and messaging. We made significant accomplishments. We're also seeing a decrease in the 12-month average demand in the service area. It's almost 2 million gallons a day lower than it was at its peak back in November. So significant progress made in this service area. The 12-month average pumping rate from the well field has continued to decrease. It was 25.74 million gallons a day at the end of April. It's still above its permit limit, but as you can see on the graph, that blue line is trending down towards the green line, which is our permit limit of 24.95. As we go through the summer, we get our normal rains. We continue sending more water through the booster station. We anticipate getting closer and closer back to our permit limit, hopefully under later this year. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent report, and so much of that is a testament to how much hard work has been put into really emphasizing conservation and you know, just everybody working together to make sure that we could manage supply and demand through this challenging time. Are there any comments or questions from board members? Mr. Eggers.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. So just, you know, I've only been here about 9 years and still have questions about the operation and how it all works, so bear with me. The Harney Canal, for one, is the most confusing thing because it flows both ways.
Yes.
And right now, I thought you had said that the river was above where it needed to be. The Hillsborough River was above where it needed to be. Maybe I missed that. And then, but we're still augmenting more water there. So I'm just trying to understand that as it relates to the city of Tampa needing water from us versus, so if you could just maybe discuss that just for a minute.
My comment on the Hillsborough River flow is that we're no longer in a deficit over the last year. It's a 4 million gallon per day surplus. But this time of year, the water that's coming down the river, which is Tampa's primary water supply source, is not enough to fully meet their demand because their reservoir level, which is basically the stretch of the river behind the dam, continues to drop each day. To help, we have a water use permit that allows us to take water from the bypass canal, lift it over the Harney structure into the river to help the city sustain that water supply. When we get to very high conditions of flow in the summer, the river is up, it's discharging over the dam. The city's demand is fully met to 82 million gallons a day. Once the flow over the river is sufficient, over the dam is sufficient, we can move water from the river back into the bypass canal and then harvest it for our use or storage in our reservoir through our Tampa Bypass Canal pump station. So it works both ways depending on time of season. But for us to augment the river from the bypass canal this in the spring is typical.
And how does that relate to the city of Tampa's request for water from Tampa, from Tampa Bay Water? How does that relate? Like right now, we're at, I think you said you're anticipating 4.5 million gallons a day next year.
Yes.
So how does that relate to what we were just talking about, the river? The stage of the river?
As the river falls, as it typically does in the spring, the city will maximize that use. We'll augment it with the Harney Canal water to sustain that use. If it still begins to drop and the city needs the additional water to make it through the spring dry season, we can also sell water to them, finished water, directly into their system. So the TBC is raw water that goes right into the river. But they may also buy from us in the springtime for potable use.
Okay. All right. That's helpful.
Yes, Commissioner. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Commissioner Oakley. I'm sorry.
Yes. Chuck, very good report that he gave earlier about the water use and things we're going. But Warren, I appreciate all your statements on the water issues and the flows and things of that nature. I think it's something that we all need to look at for our own counties of continuing one-day watering throughout the summer, mainly because of really two reasons. When we went from 2 days to 1 day, it saved 30 million gallons of use of water when we made that move. And then if we are getting 1.5 inches of rain or so, we're able to start picking up as much as 60 million gallons a day and putting in the reservoir, which continues to build it and help the whole system. But the fact of it is, I've heard in the latest conditions of our weather report for the summer, for our hurricane season, there's going to be 25 named storms. I think 5 or 6 of those are major hurricanes of a Category 3 or larger. But sounds to me like we're going to be very active in the summer and be able to collect a lot of water. And we'll also be getting a lot of water dropping on our properties in all of our counties. And the fact of that being is you wouldn't need to water anyway. So the 1 day a week would be a good place to stay while we're collecting water back up in the reservoir. So, but thank you.
Councilman Miranda, and then.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this was happening with the discussion we have about the river, happens every year about this time. However, not only do the member governments here represent the different governments that we have, we're also elected officials where we come from. So maybe those elected officials could look into the future and say, let's change the landscape, what you can plant, so you don't have to use water. That's all. Thank you.
Commissioner Eggers.
Oh, I just love hearing from Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. Just real quick, back to the consolidated water use permit, well fields in May is significantly higher. And I probably missed, because the next page showed it back down to normal, more normal in June going forward. So this one big bump this year in May, is it primarily because, number one, you're taking less from the surface water?
Correct.
The desal wouldn't be up now anyway, normally, right?
Normally, it would be.
It would be up right now? Okay, so why are we down to 60 on the surface water?
We
instead of-
are, we are now in a point where we're comfortable that with continued management of our sources, we will remain in compliance with the consolidated permit.
Okay.
So we want to keep water in the reservoir, not take out more than we really need right now, because the more we can leave in there now, the more certainty we have of getting it full, because while Commissioner Oakley's correct, the climate condition have changed, so we will likely get more tropical rain this summer. Next winter and spring are likely to be warmer and drier. So we're trying to balance our system to keep water in the reservoir, fill it at the end of summer to sustain us through next spring.
That makes sense. I knew you were thinking ahead like that. Thank you, appreciate it. The last thing I had was on the 1 day a week restrictions. I mean, I don't ever think it hurts to have discussion about that. We have a lot of reclaimed use, especially in North County, and we're actually putting meters in, which is going to allow us to manage that process better. But during the summer months, if you cut back on potable water, on irrigation, we feel it's difficult not to do the same with our reclaimed. So because it takes about 4 houses for each house to do reclaimed. So I just said, it's a balance. If we're getting all these rains, it means we're dumping more water out of the system. So we have to be careful as we balance, as we see how the rains go, and leaving that 2 a week restriction or twice a week restriction is beneficial on that side versus the once a week on the potable side. So it's a very difficult balance. I think just keeping a close eye on where we are so we can keep those temporary restrictions in place and use that as the balance. Does that make any sense, or am I just,
Yes, and one key thing or message we can all pivot to for the summer, if the restrictions from the district expire July 1st, we've been hitting conservation messaging very hard across our region. We can pivot that to say, look, it's now raining. You probably don't need to water at all this summer if Mother Nature's doing it. You can save our water supply. You can save yourself a little money and still have a healthy yard. Don't overwater. So we can make a little pivot in the summer if we can.
Yeah, I think that messaging that we got from the University of Florida that talks about how little water you need on your grass to sustain it would be helpful to bring forward again, just from an educational standpoint. So appreciate it. Thank you.
And just to be clear, right now the 1 day a week restriction is something that has been put in place by SwiftMud. If that were removed, it would be up to each individual jurisdiction to make those decisions. That's not something that, say, Tampa Bay Water would have authority over for the entire region.
That is correct. It would be up to each local jurisdiction to choose to go to 1 day a week or to go back to 2 day.
So really, it's for each of us to consider what makes sense and what the public sentiment might be in our community. But I think regardless of where we go with it, I think your suggestion is well taken. We've got to keep emphasizing the message and make sure that we don't encourage people to just revert back to what they were automatically doing before the restrictions went into effect. So thank you for that. Is there any other,
I just
Councilman
want to say
Miranda?
thank you to Mr. Hogg. He's been very on point on everything he said. And again, I want to bring up another thing we could do if we, as elected officials somewhere else, what's good for one is good for all, what's good for all is good for one, meaning that evaporation is another item that we haven't talked about, losing the water because of the heat. And when you have less water coming down and more heat, you have more evaporation per percentage points. So if we had panels over a lot of our water districts that we have in the rivers and in the lakes and in the reservoirs and so forth, you solve two problems. You save water and you create electricity. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Hogg. Very, very good report and discussion. At this time, we are going to move on to our action items. We have 2 action items to consider today. The first is item C1, and that is being presented by Mr. Carden.
Yes, item C1 is the Cypress Creek Chemical Piping Replacement Project, which will replace the existing chemical feed systems at the creek, at the Cypress Creek pump station. Ammonia hydroxide, sodium hypochlorite, and sodium hydroxide are the piping changes. The construction contract for the project was competitively bid, and we did receive 2 bids. Our design engineer, Hazen & Sawyer, has evaluated the low bidder of TLC Diversified and finds it to be responsible bidder, and it is also within our budget. Staff requests the board approval of this contract to the lowest bidder, TLC Diversified, in the amount of $6,508,280. It also includes a $330,000 owner's allowance. So that's item C1.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Miranda, second.
Yeah, second, I had a question. real quick.
Okay, second from Commissioner Eggers, and he has a question.
Chuck, you said it was within our budget. It actually came in under budget, right?
Yes, very slightly under. It was real close to that. It was like 6.4 was our budget.
With all of our capital requirements, are we starting to see that? I don't know who I would ask that question to. Are we starting to see a kind of a topping off of pricing, the craziness that was going on, or is it still rising? Yeah, Maria, that would be good.
I will say that this is an outlier, so we will see in the next few projects that we will be bidding. So we were lucky in this instance that it came below budget by $32,000.
Well, we can be hopeful.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, please record your vote.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Thank you very much. And we will go on to item C2 and Mr. Hogg.
Good morning again. I have a brief presentation for you this morning on the Optimized Regional Operations Plan. This is our 2024 Operations Plan Biennial Report. This is an action item, and I will be requesting your approval at the end of this brief presentation. The operations plan is what we use to guide and schedule production between all of Tampa Bay Water's supply facilities. It does include the Optimized Regional Operations Plan, or OROP, which schedules the production between all of the groundwater well fields based on the current environmental conditions that we see. This plan is required by the Consolidated Water Use Permit. It's named in the amended and restated interlocal agreement, and it was a requirement of the partnership agreement that this agency signed with the Water Management District and members. A biennial report of activities is still required to be submitted under our Consolidated Water Use Permit. Our source rotation and water production staffs work together each week on a production schedule that meets the demands of the member governments at each point of connection. Each week, this schedule considers the forecast demand, the current environmental conditions around our facilities, the operational status of each supply source, and any infrastructure constraints like the minimum flow required through each pipe or pumping station. The weekly schedule includes the recommended production rates by facility down to the individual production well in the well fields. The operations staff reviews this and they implement it with adjustments to make sure that they meet demands 24/7. Each week we take a look at what was forecast to be produced and what we actually produced, so we have incorporated a continuous feedback loop so we can make improvements on our operations. One of the key models is the optimized regional operations plan inside of this weekly production schedule. This model reviews the water levels in each of the well fields and creates an optimized pumping schedule down to the individual well that produces the minimum amount of drawdown in the surficial aquifer. We have 40 wells throughout the well fields, and those water levels are correlated to water levels in lakes and wetlands nearby. So when we minimize drawdown in the surficial aquifer, we're minimizing the drawdown in all of these environmental features. And this model was a key reason that we achieved environmental recovery across the northern Tampa Bay area. This biannual report is a summary of the prior 2 water years' activities, and it includes hydrologic conditions, how we schedule production at each facility versus what we actually produce, and any changes to the operations plan. The only change we have included this year is an update on those target water levels in the 40 control points based on the last 2 years of actual data. We update those regression analyses to make sure we're offering the most protection for all of the lakes and wetlands in our facilities. This is a primary environmental permit as named in the amended and restated interlocal agreement, and it is subject to arbitration by the member governments. Staff recommends approval of this biannual report to submit to the Water Management District by July 1st of this year.
Thank you very much. Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilwoman Hanowitz, seconded by Councilman Miranda. Is there any discussion? If not, please record your vote.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to presentations and reports. Our first is our member government report for this meeting, and it is coming from the City of Tampa.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, I get to share a little bit about us. I'm Rory Jones, City of Tampa Water Department Director. Share a little bit about us, about our infrastructure, a little bit about some of the challenges, and I heard some construction costs are one of those, and highlight some projects that we're working on here. I'll start with really our overall system here. We have 220 square mile area, service population of over 725,000, 142,000 accounts across the City of Tampa and parts of unincorporated Hillsborough County, 50,000 valves and 2,200 miles of pipe ranging in size from 2 to 54 inch, and many different ages in there as well. We have just one treatment plant. Back in 1923, the City of Tampa purchased back the Tampa Water Works company and began plans in 1923 for the Hillsborough River treatment plant. You can see that here, which is known today as David L. Tippin Water Treatment Facility. It was originally designed at 7.6 MGD, and actually this is not necessarily the original picture. There were some improvements being made here, but the source water has always been the same. It's always been Hillsborough River. Although we have increased from 7.6 MGD, and we are, actively taking 82 million gallons a day on average, and with the regional partnership here of Tampa Bay Water and some use of ASR wells, we're serving greater than that. We have 2 elevated storage tanks. One of these you can see from I-275, just south of Raymond James Stadium there, painted like a cigar band. And our other casts shadows there on Plant City, down in our south zone. And we are set up with 3 different pressure zones to minimize, in the unlikely event of failure, pressure loss, and also helps with our water quality as well. The West Tampa tank is in that central zone, and the Palmacia tank is in that south zone. We also have some ground storage tanks at 3 different sites. Two of those tanks here at Morse Bridge. We have another tank at Northwest, and at our Inner Bay pump station, we have another ground storage tank. And we have 2 connection points to Tampa Bay water. Our primary there is at Morse Bridge, and you can kind of barely see it. That's your tank to the right, our 2 tanks to the left. And we take water here up to 40 MGD is what it's capable of. The second is in that smaller picture to the top, which you really can't see too well. But that's our 301 emergency interconnect, and that's we can take up to 30 MGD there. That's on 301 just north of Adamo near the surface water. So our structure, we're set up with a little over 300 team members across 3 different divisions. Our production division really focuses on the treatment side of things and the remote pumping. Our distribution and consumer services side handles really the pipeline maintenance and the billing and call center. And our engineering team supports both those divisions as well as manages the capital improvement projects and our new development. So some of the challenges we've seen. Well, with a nearly 100-year-old system comes 100-year-old problems. And over the past decade, we've seen a lot of breaks, a lot of interruptions to service. Our capacity was limited and really didn't have any built-in redundancy. So in 2019, Brad Barrett back here and his team secured approvals for bond that ultimately won, bond buyer deal of the year awards, established base rate pay and a slow and gradual increase in our rate over a couple of decades. And about 3 years ago, we did receive the final AAA rating from Fitch. So we have a AAA rating across the board there that we're proud of. So what this does, this is really a $2.9 billion water and wastewater funding plan that starts to check off some master planning projects that we had for both our distribution system and our treatment plant. It also gives us an opportunity to provide a sustainable pipeline replacement and get some of those 100-year-old pipes out of our system. And with that money, we've been hard at work. The first we'd like to highlight here is our Hive service pump station. We just put 2 of these pumps online. It'll be a total of 8 pumps at 25 MGD, and we don't necessarily need that in capacity. That's really for redundancy. We've built in ability to take every component of the system down to be able to service in the dry. This project also replaces and rehabs a lot of our underground storage tanks. And you can see just a few of these pictures of us installing the pumps. Right now, we are on schedule to complete this by the end of the year. Next is our chemical system improvements project. This is really removing our gaseous chlorine system and installing on-site hypochlorite generators to produce a low-strength or low-concentration hypochlorite for secondary disinfection. The system is significantly safer and makes us less reliant on others for chemicals. Well, as of this morning, we have fully decommissioned the gaseous chlorine system, backing the rail cars out, and we're running off bulk high strength right now as we are building the on-site generators. We had to make room by decommissioning the old system, pull the rail cars out, and that's going to be the home for these new on-site generators. The third project here I wanted to highlight is really adding some capacity and some necessary redundancy with deeper filters. These are going to house our granulated activated carbon along with other media. Filters, they are fully covered. We are looking to start construction any day now, and we're expecting to complete this in 2027. It does give us some additional redundancy, not only in the filters, but also in our surge tank and gives us some needed capacity to be able to take down some original filter flumes and original filters to be able to get in there and properly maintain and service the older stuff. Everything we've been designing is in three-dimensional. We're able to walk our operators through these visually with virtual reality goggles. Gives a sense of space much better to some of our operators, and we get really good feedback. So everything we've been doing is in a three-dimensional aspect, and this will ultimately land in a asset management type program that we can click on individual components and know the past performance of that particular pump or valve or fitting. So with this, $2.9 billion, we've seen some drastic cost increases that you've mentioned, and we haven't seen it let up yet. In the last 2 years, just our cost per mile of pipe installed on average has more than doubled, and it's hurt us. We've had to make some, tough decisions. We're going to have to delay some of our pipeline projects in order to get all our needs met. We estimated our work at 1.5 billion of that, and we are going to have, looks like with our estimates, we're going to have to delay roughly $488 million of that on our pipeline side. So some upcoming work, additional work at our treatment plant is a replacement of our raw water pumps, whole new intake system. We'll add some needed capacity, needed resiliency and redundancy. Ozone improvements. We will completely rehab and replace components of our ozone, and that's our primary disinfection. And then finally here, the suspended ion exchange. We did pilot this both at our water and wastewater facilities and saw great success. Some downstream chemical savings and met water quality goals as well. Excited for that, and we're hoping to be in design for this by the end of the year. And finally, we're looking to just update our master plans on the distribution side. Our facility side, we've kind of neglected. We've all focused on just the unit processes and the pipeline. We've got a growing workforce and growing needs and limited space, and really need to look at the building side and where people go. So that's going to be included in our master planning efforts this go around. So over the next decade, construction is going to be a normal part of this site. It seems like no part of the plant is going to go unturned, and we are expecting to touch every aspect of this facility, all while trying to maintain 24/7 operations. And our connections and relationships with you help us continue to do that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Wustel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, could you tell me your name again?
Rory Jones.
Mr. Jones, sometimes because I'm county-wide over all of Hillsborough, we get inquiries that aren't technically in our wheelhouse, and I'm sure vice versa. Sometimes City of Tampa gets inquiries that should be handled by the county, and one of them is the smell and taste of chlorine. So is this update on the I think on page, that's not numbered, on your chemical system improvements page where you're saying on-site hypochlorite? I'm not going to pretend to know all of these scientific terms and water treatment methods, but is that going to reduce the amount of chlorine? Is that what you?
Yeah, and so what you're probably getting is currently right now we're in a chlorine maintenance event, and so we're running free chlorine out of our plant, and so that does noticeably change the smell. During this 3-week event, we're looking to end that here in about a week, in which we will pick up and start buying from you guys just after that's done. But that's what's probably being noticed. This will run under the radar and not necessarily have that high chlorine concentration smell.
So is this new system intended for you to not have to continue doing the current 3-week, or is that a permanent
It
thing?
is, no, that's, our chlorine maintenance event will occur likely two times a year still, even with this.
Okay, and my other question, I think you answered it. When you said that you increased your rates, I was going to ask, did that rate increase fully fund you? But it sounded like later on you said that inflation has reduced your expectations.
Yeah, our dollars are going not quite as far. What we're finding is delaying us, it's roughly 7 miles of pipe, or 7 years is what is pushing our pipeline replacement out. So we were hoping to get this done in a 20-year timeframe. It's pushing us out 7 years.
You know, right now we're putting forward, and they're still working at the county with all of the interlocal agreements on the CIT renewal. But it's something that I pointed out to my colleagues, that there's that actual CIT agreement and the language in that ordinance allows for water and wastewater improvements and enhancements. So I know that the city has a lot of needs, but I just wanted you to make that aware of a possible funding source for some of your unexpected shortfalls. I know that the mayor is in charge of, or the mayor's city council, I'm not sure how their government works there, but I would just say that I've told everyone that no one has yet felt the full weight of the decisions that were made in 21 and 22, and that they don't understand the inflationary pressures outside of regular consumer indexes, and that when it comes to construction, it's way higher, and that those impacts will be felt in years to come, and this is exactly one of those verticals. So I wish you luck on your challenges. Yeah. Thank you.
One thing we've done is engage a construction crew as well to help us in those pipeline side of things. And so far, we've seen a 60 to 70% savings across the board on low bid contracts. So we're hoping to slowly ramp that up and help bite off that 7-year delay a little bit.
Wonderful.
Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much for that. That's a really great report. Just a quick question. Do any of the improvements, either in the filtration, the ozone improvements, or the suspended ion exchange, does any of that help with the elimination of PFAS?
Any of the chemical system improvements, you said filters, or the, what was the other one?
The ozone, or the, I guess it was suspended ion?
Suspended ion exchange, yeah. Signs are looking good. I can't say definitively. We've done some jar testing. When we originally piloted this at the treatment plant, PFAS detection limits were not low enough. We did look at this when we piloted it at the wastewater treatment plant, and we are diving back into it a little bit more now. Signs do look promising. I wouldn't say it's a solve-all, but the combination of suspended ion exchange along with the, let's call it the backstop of our filters and granulated activated carbon looks good.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I remember when I first got on the commission in 2014, now it's like, seems like a long time ago, or just yesterday in some instances, but the water director that was leaving at the time said his biggest concern was the condition of our distribution system and the age of it. And so do you have a full inventory of your system now? Do you know the conditions of those? That probably
we
keeps
do.
you up at night a little bit.
We do, but it's getting better. We've noticed, and I missed it to include that slide. We basically have all our pipe in an asset management program with a priority-driven replacement on it. And in that is the years or the age of it as well. And I have seen our age slowly starting to decline. I think on the average, we were greater than 88 years, and now we're a little bit lower than that. I'm going to say it's great, but we are moving in the right direction.
Well, I see that you're aging okay, because when did you take the director position?
It was in November of
Congratulations. You bit off a lot. There's an awful lot to get back in line. And I commend the council for making that investment a couple of years ago, was it? for that, was it 2.9
Yeah,
billion?
2.9 billion, yes,
That's
yes.
that's a big number. So I really impressive. Just see if I had one other question for you. No, I'm good. I really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hanawitz.
Thank you. And Rory, thank you for the great presentation as a council member in the city of St. Pete. I've had similar presentations, especially when you talk about, for instance, 2,200 miles. What does that represent? And people don't understand. For our city, they describe it, and it's not 2,200 because we have less, but it's like going from St. Petersburg to Portland, Maine. That's how much pipe is below in our system that needs to be, replaced. And it really gives people kind of that picture. I mean, the miles that you're talking about, you could go cross country. I'm not sure where, but you could go cross country with 2,200 miles of water mains and 100 years old. That's a lot of work. And when I look at your number, because we have similar numbers, obviously, $2.9 billion, that's in 20 years, that's $145 million a year that needs to be funded. And that's by the ratepayer. That's a lot of money. And it just goes to show, I know that there were many years that there were not utility rate increases, but there is a cost to pay. You can't just put off infrastructure forever. And I really do feel for our public works administrators and staff, because they have some of the hardest jobs out there, because people don't see the pipes. It's very easy to do all the nice, pretty projects that are shiny, but the real infrastructure that's critical to a working city, that we don't see every day. And if our systems fail, it's critical. So I commend, the decisions have been made, by the city of Tampa to really invest in their system lately, because we all need to, because our cities really, when you're at that 100-year age, there's some pipes that need to be fixed. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. When I was on the Tampa City Council, a number of pipe bursts and different incidents that took place, the water main breaks, it was constant. And so I certainly understand why the city made the investment they did. I wanted to just end this on a lighter note and tell you that when I first was elected, I went and visited the David L. Tippin water treatment plant, and it's a beautiful, beautiful plant right on the Hillsborough River. And I told the mayor, Buckhorn, at the time that perhaps we could rent it out as a wedding venue as a way of raising money to pay for our pipe improvements. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you
for that. We are going to move on now to item D2, which is 2024 public opinion survey results. And I believe Brandon Moore is going to present that. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. I'm Brandon Moore, the Public Communications Manager, and with me today is Joseph St. Germain from Downs and St. Germain Research. We have a brief presentation today to give you a summary of the results of the 2024 Public Opinion Survey. And I'll follow it with a few communications recommendations at the end. We conduct this survey every 3 years. The purpose is to explore some public attitudes regarding a variety of water-related topics, ranging from water needs to water sources and conservation and cost. We use the data in combination with other qualitative research like focus groups to help us update our strategic communications plan. But we also use the data. It informs and helps shape our project scope, specifically long-term master water plan projects moving into feasibility. So now I'll hand it over to Joseph to walk through the results.
All right, thank you, Brandon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board. Again, my name is Joseph St. Germain. I'm the president of Downs and St. Germain Research, and I'm going to go give a broad overview of the results of this study. Again, Brandon mentioned some of the questions we asked. The questions that we ask relate to a variety of topics that you see on your screen. The questionnaire was created by looking at previous versions of the questionnaire and then some feedback that we tweak from every iteration of the survey. Just to give you a sense of the survey itself, it was an online study with with 1,249 individuals in your service area. The survey was conducted in early February to early March. And to give you a sense of the margin of error, across the whole study, the margin of error is just under 3%. And then for each separate county, it is just under 5%. Again, there is a much longer version of this in your board packet, but this is a broad overview that'll cover a few things. And again, I always want to note with any study like this, when we're talking to a public entity, this is a statistically valid survey that is representative of your population. Let's start with water needs. Overall, half of your residents served by Tampa Bay Water believe that public officials are adequately meeting the drinking water needs of the region. As you can see on the screen, that doesn't vary too much by county. And then also, as you looked at the year-over-year results, there was not very much difference. As we look, and then along those lines, I also looked at the no percentage. That's only around 20%, 22% overall across the whole region, and then with small variations within each county. The next set of questions that I'm going to go over today is we ask them if they believe there'll be enough water to service their area now and then 5, 10, and 15 years into the future. As of right now, there is 70% of your service area believes there's enough water in the region to service all of your population. There are a couple notes that I want to kind of look at this as trends on this graph as I see them. There is pessimism as we go further down the road. That percentage goes a little bit lower each interval down the road. And then also you'll note that there is a bit of a decline compared to 2021. However, the 2024 levels are near the 2018 levels. So that's an overall trend when it comes to water needs on the whole. Next, I want to shift to perceptions of Tampa Bay Water. I want to first start with aided recall. What percentage of your populations recognizes Tampa Bay Water and who they are? And that aided recall is fairly modest, with 20% of your population having aided recall of Tampa Bay Water, down slightly from 2023. We then asked some follow-up questions on the perceptions of Tampa Bay Water. I will say, as I go through all these, I won't go through each single data point, but the one thing that we notice is in every single data point, there's an increase from 2018. However, it is about the same or down a little bit when compared to 2021. Now, 87% agree that Tampa Bay Water is effectively supplying water to the region. That's a 5 percentage point increase from 2018. So nearly 9 out of 10 of your population believes Tampa Bay Water is effectively supplying water to the region. At that next level, 3 in 4 residents agree that Tampa Bay Water is concerned about the environment. And then another 7 in 10 believe that Tampa Bay Water is concerned about finding new sources of water to meet their needs and helping governments cooperate on water problems. Again, with all of those, these are about the same or slightly lower compared to 2021, but increases from 2018. And then finally, around 2 in 3 agree that the agency is effectively developing water conservation programs that can lower water use. A few more on the perceptions of Tampa Bay Water. A little bit over half of your service population agree that the agency listens to the community and accepts the ideas that may benefit the region. Nearly 80% believe that Tampa Bay Water helps protect the region's water resources. 3 in 5 think Tampa Bay Water develops new water sources in an environmentally sound manner. And then finally, 80% rate Tampa Bay Water as being good, very good, or excellent at planning, developing, producing, and delivering high water supply to the area. And once again, all of these were about the same or slightly lower compared to 21, but all up compared to 2018. I'm going to shift to the next topic. I'm going to talk about water sources. Again, this is just a broad overview. Much deeper dive is in the full report. When it comes to where people think their water is coming from, the Florida aquifer is the most frequently named source, with about 2 in 5 naming this source. But then also springs, reservoirs, and rivers are mentioned frequently as sources of water. I do want to note that there's to be a couple areas like this that we show some decreases in understanding where their water is coming from. That could be a variety of reasons, but one of the things that we wanted to note is there has been a significant population increase since 2021 to 2024. So you have a significant group of folks who may not have been here that long. So that's a variable that I always want to consider when we're looking at data like this. Next, we asked some questions about water sources and if they would drink tap water from those sources. Residents are more willing to drink tap water that comes from the fresh groundwater from the Floridan aquifer, with nearly 9 in 10 willing to drink water from that source, and then 2/3 are willing to drink river water. I did want to note that less than 1 in 3 will drink tap water from reclaimed water. And the other note I want to say on here is the top acceptable sources, fresh groundwater, river water, and seawater, those are acceptable. They're also the 3s that are being used currently. We asked another question on what's important when deciding whether to accept a new water supply. The options that your residents were given were environmental stewardship, reliability, and project costs. Environmental stewardship came in first with over 2 in 5 of Tampa Bay Water's service area believing environmental stewardship is the most important consideration. Reliability was close behind, and project costs was a distant third when it comes to what's important. We're going to shift topics again to reclaimed water because this survey covers a lot of ground. So in this scenario, we gave them 4 scenarios and asked, would you drink reclaimed water, and gave them a scenario of how that would get to their homes and to their businesses. But before I go into each data source, I will say the one note that I want to say is there was increases from 2018 to 2021 to 2024 in all of these scenarios. So in scenario 1, about 43% of your residents are willing to drink reclaimed water that has been cleaned to drinking water standards, then put back in the ground, reservoirs and rivers, then withdrawn and treated again to drinking water standards before being sent to homes and businesses. That is a 2% increase from the previous year. As we look at the next scenario, about 40%, which is plus 5% from 2021, are willing to drink reclaimed water that has been cleaned to drinking water standards and blended with other drinking water before being sent to homes and businesses. Scenario 3, about 43% and up 6% from 2021 of your residents are willing to drink reclaimed water that has been put back to groundwater, reservoirs, or rivers, then withdrawn and treated again before being sent to homes and businesses. And then finally, the 4th scenario where we saw the biggest increase in willingness to drink water in this manner, nearly half of your population are willing to drink reclaimed water that has been put in a salty or non-drinking water zone of the aquifer to increase groundwater levels, resulting in a credit that can be used to withdraw groundwater several miles away at a different location and then treated to drinking water standards. This was a 14% increase year over year. We did want to note there's probably 2 things contributing to that specifically. One, there's been some community-specific outreach for the South Hillsborough Wellfield. And then also we updated the wording on this option to include that no reclaimed water would enter the drinking water system. I will note with all of those scenarios, between 1 in 4 and about 1 in 3 would be unwilling to drink reclaimed water in those situations. Again, we're going to change topics to water quality. And just a straightforward question, do you drink tap water? 56% of your residents will drink household tap water, up 3 percentage points from 2021. There are differences by county. Hillsborough County, we're more likely to drink household tap water, followed by Pinellas and then Pasco County. Reasons for not drinking tap water, the top 3 items have been the same each time we've done this study. Number 1, they don't like the taste. Number 2, they think bottled water tastes better or it's better quality. Those have been the top 3 reasons in each iteration of this survey. And there's other reasons such as the quality, they don't like the smell, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the taste and the preference for bottled water has been a part of the top 3 in all years. And I did also want to note that 3 in 5 residents think bottled water is safer than tap water. As we look at the characteristics of your water, we ask all your residents to rate water on 6 items on a 5-point scale, where 1 is poor and 5 is excellent. The number one rating is appearance, where on a 5-point scale, appearance is rated a 3.6, followed somewhat behind by odor, safety, cost, and purity of tap water. And I did want to note the taste, as we related to the previous question, the taste is the lowest rated item. So just another thing to continue with the messaging on the water and purity and taste and appearance, things of that nature. All right, we're going to shift to water costs. I know we talked budget a lot earlier today, so let's spend some time on cost. We asked residents, does the amount of your water bill affect your use of tap water? Over 2 in 5 residents say that their water bill does affect the use of tap water. That's up from 38% in a previous year. On another question related to cost, we asked basically a value question. Given what you receive, would you say the cost is about right, too high, or too low? A little bit over half of your residents believe the cost is about right. However, 2 in 5 believe that the cost is too high, which increased a bit from 2021, and I'll have a couple of notes on that in a second. And then finally, we asked some questions on how much more they'd be willing to pay. The average amount residents are willing to pay for more advanced treatment technologies is $6 per month, down about $1 from 2021. I did want to note a couple of things. With those last 3 cost questions, we looked at results by income, and we noted that every household with a household income of $100,000 or lower had similar views on cost when it comes to related water. They were a little bit more sensitive to cost, whereas any household at over 100K was less sensitive to cost. And the other thing that I want to note, we did see some decreases, or some more cost sensitivities compared to 2021. One of the macro things is the economy was a bit stronger in 2021 as opposed to 2024 as it is today. Closing up with a couple more slides. Next, on information sources. The Southwest Florida Water Management District remains the most trusted source for reporting on water issues, followed closely by residents' utility company and this board, Tampa Bay Water. And then when we ask people where they prefer to receive information about water issues, direct mail, email, and internet was the top 3. That is just one of the notes that we have in whether we're in front of this board or many other boards. Multimodal approaches to communication are vital in this day and age. And then finally, on demographics, we asked a variety of demographics. We just want to note a few of the demographics here, but the typical age is about 52 years of age. 2/3 own their home, a typical income of a little bit under $74,000 a year. And the biggest note that I just want to mention here is that the sample from here, it is representative of the population of your entire service area. Before we hand over to questions, I'll hand it back to Brandon for a couple of communication recommendations.
Thanks, Joseph. So as we've done in the past, we'll use this data along with any board input today to update our communications plan. But I want to share just a few of the high-level recommendations that we have for you today. We know from the data that water quality remains a concern, so we recommend updating and running our regional water quality campaign to address those concerns. All of this is to let residents know that the water that our member governments receive from Tampa Bay Water is high quality, it meets or is better than all state and federal regulations, and that we have a plan to address any new regulations. And then for residents who are concerned about growth in our region, whether there'll be enough water or whether elected officials are doing enough to address the issues, we encourage you to participate in our community presentations and continue to communicate future water plans in your regular communications with your constituents. We'll also incorporate our environmental successes into our project outreach, and we'll include those in community presentations and other communications to remind residents of the successful track record of environmental stewardship that Tampa Bay Water has. And then we'll continue to educate and inform stakeholders on all potential new water sources, including direct and indirect potable reuse options, like we did with the South Hillsborough well field. And finally, we'll use this data and the input gathered through last year's community outreach to shape and refine our project scopes for our long-term master water plan projects and developmental alternatives. More importantly, we'll report and communicate this information to our stakeholders as we continue this outreach to show them that we're listening. And with that, we'll answer any questions you might have.
Commissioner Mariano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the water quality, we got reasons for not drinking tap water. I personally, the water comes out of the tap, tastes terrible to me. I won't drink it. But we have reverse osmosis, so I filter it and it tastes great, just as good as any bottled water. I'm wondering why you don't go after that type of discussion with folks as far as finding out, do you have an RO system in your house? Do you use it? Is that why you maybe use the tap water? And then maybe somehow to get that question, you haven't done it since 2018, so it's hard to take new data, but somehow I think you should look at that to see what people think.
Okay.
Commissioner Westall?
Thank you. You said that the increase of people's willingness to drink reclaimed water was due to some messaging that had gone out?
It could have been for two things. So that particular question was with regard to the a specific use. So it was putting it into the into a salty non-drinking water zone of the aquifer. So it's pretty much the situation that we have with the South Hillsborough well field with relation to the Sharp project. I think the most important reason for the increase here is because we clarified the question, and we said that no reclaimed water would enter the drinking water system. So, but there also has been additional outreach down there on the South Hillsborough well field with the community.
On their willingness to drink reclaimed water, or?
Just education on the project itself.
Okay. I guess my concern, and Mr. Hogg can come up here and dunk on me if he needs to, but we don't know with absolute certainty the science of whether or not it's safe yet to potentially or ever drink reclaimed water, correct?
The treatment technology exists to clean any water. There are places that do use direct or indirect potable reuse. It's a question of how many systems you have in place, the redundancy, the reliability, and public acceptance. We can take water, any type of water, down to pure H2O by distilling it. But what's the process, the cost, and the willingness to accept?
Do we have any current programs or language in our current marketing and outreach program that is designed to try and promote increased interest and willingness to drink reclaimed water?
Our outreach is solely focused on educating residents with the facts that we know. And we take their input. For instance, we went out with the long-term master water plan outreach through surveys like this, through virtual meetings, and we asked them, what would make you comfortable? What information do you need to know to be comfortable with this source? And so now that we've taken that information, we've included it in the feasibility studies so we can gather it and then go back out and tell the public what we heard or what we learned.
So the answer is yes.
Yeah, for marketing, no, but education, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. There is an awful lot to unpack here, and I think it'd be kind of interesting as we have brought our different communities, member governments to do presentations here, that maybe we take parts of this in future board meetings and just have some discussion about pieces of it that I think, and it doesn't have to be long, it can be 15 minutes, half an hour at most, that just talk a little bit about certain parts of this study, because I think you hate to let this just come and go and wait for the next result to see a percent up or down. I do think the Sharp project, which is, I think, described as that one piece of using the water at the salty or non-drinking water zone, and then getting credits elsewhere. That's a huge increase. So they're either understanding it, I guess everybody's understanding that better. It's not any kind of reclaimed in the system itself. I've had many calls that just say, what are you guys talking about, reclaimed in our water? I said, well, you can be pretty certain that there won't be any reclaimed use in potable water into the 2030s of 2040. If we're looking at water supply sources right now, alternatives in the 2033 plan that don't include that as far as the drinking water. I mean, it does have it using it in the SHARP program like programs, but it's just interesting to see about, how that Swift Mud is perceived as a high trusted area in Tampa Bay water below the distribution systems of our member governments. So I guess get government closer to the people. I don't know. It's just kind of strange how that works out. But when you look at the infrastructure of this organization and the water supply projects that we're doing and planning, they're 20-year-old pipes. They're 15-year-old pipes. Our cities and counties are just a lot older. The water systems, so the water supply projects, are thought out 10 years ahead of time to make sure that we have enough water in the years to come. And yet that one graph that showed, I guess as you went forward, a decreasing amount of belief that there's enough water being planned, I guess we're not getting that message through, that not only do you have a good system in place today that's doing passing all of the water testing that you need, but we're also planning for that 2028 water supply project, a 2033 water supply project, probably be a 2040 supply. We seem to be cutting that down into shorter periods to make sure that we have that water source availability. So again, we're not as close to our residents, but maybe in partnership with our member governments, we can get the word out about the integrity of the system and also the planning that goes in. But I would like to see some of this discussed in bite-sized pieces at our meetings here. Thank you.
Councilman Miranda.
No, thank you. I'm just going to listen.
Okay. Commissioner Scott, and then Mariano, I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think to tie on to Commissioner Eggers' comments there, people see the explosion in population growth and just assume that our resources are not going to be able to keep pace with that. It's my gut feel on why the results of the further you go out, the less confidence there is in those resources to be available. So I think a future question would be, maybe are you aware of these projects that are coming down the line, to start sort of educating the public about what we are doing and what we are planning for. Because I think, people just look around and they see, you hear it all the time, just in St. Petersburg, all the development that's going on down there. Well, there's going to be the resources to accommodate that. Is the wastewater treatment facility going to be there? Where's the fresh water going to come from? And people just see that, I think, everywhere. So to the extent that we can help to educate the public about what we're planning for and what we have in the pipeline, pun intended, would be a good thing. Thank you.
Commissioner Mariano.
I was hoping to go after Councilman Miranda, but we'll go down that road. Years ago, we talked about when we would be getting to a point of drinking treated reclaimed water or other treated water, et cetera. I've never been a fan of it, still not. When I look at the question of putting salty water or non-drinking water into a water zone for the aquifer, I think it's a dangerous thing to do. I think you get to keep that aquifer pure. I'm more of a fan of taking that reclaimed water and putting it, if not directly on a lawn, letting Mother Nature do its thing, or taking it to big areas like up at Crossbar or whatever and kind of let it saturate in there, let Mother Nature treat it. I think it's a much better way to go. The extra cost of having to do the higher water treatments to get it back to drinking water standards, if someone wanted to go do that, I don't think it's the best way to go about it. I'd rather see us try to work on that natural component of getting reclaimed water areas where we can then let it filter itself through Mother Nature.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation. And we are now going to move on to water quality update. Steve Fleischacker, Water Quality Services Senior Manager, is going to give this report. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Today's update covers water quality compliance, EPA's new PFAS limits, and Tampa Bay Water's third quarter PFAS results. This presentation is for information only, and no board action will be requested today. Tampa Bay Water continues to provide water that meets or is better than current requirements. During the past quarter, we published our annual water quality report, which is known as the Consumer Confidence Report, or CCR. This report, which demonstrated compliance, is available to the public on our website. As reported by Mr. Carton at last board meeting, the EPA announced final limits for 6 per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances known as PFAS. This new National Primary Drinking Water Regulation was published in the Federal Register last month, and compliance is required in 5 years, which is 2 more years than EPA initially proposed back in 2023. And just as a reminder, PFAS do not originate in water supplies. When products like the ones you see on this slide are used or discarded, they can release PFAS into the environment, which includes drinking water sources. Tampa Bay Water has supported our member utilities' participation in EPA's study to find out if soon-to-be regulated and unregulated PFAS are present in our region's drinking water. The first, second, and now third testing events have been completed. 1 PFAS, perfluorooctane sulfonate, or PFOS, remains slightly above EPA's new limit of 4.0 parts per trillion. As shown on this slide, the average PFOS level at our regional delivery location to Hillsborough County's Lithia water treatment plant was 4.4 parts per trillion, which is close to the EPA's new limit. Now, since this delivery location is a blend of surface water from our regional treatment plant and groundwater from our Brandon Urban Dispersed or Bud well field, we sampled and analyzed the Bud well field and found 3 of 4 wells had PFOS levels greater than 4.0 parts per trillion. So we resampled these wells last month to confirm the earlier findings, and these results are pending. Average PFOS at other Tampa Bay Water regional locations were below the new EPA limits or not detected. The 5 other newly regulated PFAS were all below the EPA's new limits or not detectable at all regional delivery locations, which is great news.
Let me just ask you one question, if you don't mind. So you have the results pending from those wells that you've isolated. If you were to get results back that still show them in excess, can you just can you take any remedial action right away, or do you isolate those particular wells for special attention? How do you deal with that?
So the important point is that those wells will blend with our regional surface water, and that goes to the Lithia treatment plant, Hillsborough's Lithia treatment plant. And those results are at 4.4, just above the limit. So just because those wells are higher, it blends with water that has lower concentration before it gets delivered to a point of connection.
But you're testing individual wells. You're going deeper into the problem essentially as you're sort of looking for the source.
Right, because one of the things that we're trying to evaluate is how best to reduce the levels to meet the requirements. So one option could be to treat a particular well or set of wells as opposed to treating way back at the surface water treatment plant.
Got it. And again, remind us, when do those EPA regulations actually go into effect?
So they go into effect in June of this year. They were published in the Federal Register in April, but they take 60 days to become effective. Nevertheless, the compliance requirement is 5 years after the April date.
So you have 5 years to come into compliance.
That's correct.
Got it. Thank you. Go ahead.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Commissioner Mariano.
Thank you. To get on a little bit further with that, I would like to see a much better map detailed out to show us these wells, what the counts are. So we can actually look at how, is it like 2 or 3 bad wells we got, or is it 5 or 6? I'm not comfortable with just blending it just because we can meet requirements that the federal government says is okay. I think we should try to do better than that.
So there were 3 out of 4 of the wells that were producing on the day we sampled. 3 out of the 4 were above the 4.0 limit.
Okay. Now, what have we looked at doing for treating that water that's coming out of those?
That'll be part of a plan that we develop after we get the 4th round of sampling, and the reason for that is compliance is required based on an annual average calculation. That's how EPA's set the limits.
So in Pasco County, there's a company called Deus Analytics. They actually look to treat through membranes, through nanotechnology, this type of water. They think they can do it. I know, Chuck, you've talked to them. What has happened with those conversations about them looking at these bad wells to go treat it?
Yes, Warren has had discussions with that company. And Warren, would you give an update real quick?
Yes, Commissioner, I've been in touch with the company, and they are working on some pilot scale studies, and as soon as they're ready, they're going to have us come to their facility, and we can take a look at their treatment technology and see if it could be useful in the treatment system that will be coming back to the board to recommend later in the year. So we're waiting for them to put their system in place so we can go take a look at what they can do.
Are there any other companies that do the same type of treatment that are out there we can look at and start the dialogues, not just with this one, but with others as well?
We will be looking at the different treatment technologies as we get into recommendations for you later this year of how to address PFOS where we find it and take care of that, as well as the total organic carbon issue that was requested of us 2-3 years ago. That's coming back to you later, which is, I think, part of Steve's recommendations.
Okay, I'm just a little impatient to wait that long while we have
I may-
opportunities out there we can take a look at now.
If I may, the EPA has recommended certain types of technologies for the removal of PFAS, or in our case, PFOS, and granular activated carbon, and ion exchange are the two favored options, and those are the ones we've actually studied for the removal of TOC. So we have information on the types of systems and how they would be applied at different treatment locations. What we're waiting for is to determine exactly which locations we would need to put those systems, if we need them, once we have all the data.
Okay, but again, I want to make sure we explore what's the best way possible, whatever it may be, just because the federal government makes a recommendation to it. I don't want to just go down that road blindly, just to listen to them. If there's something better out there that they haven't gone through their process, so be it. Let's go take a look at it.
That'll be part of a plan we present to you in the coming months.
Commissioner Eggers and then Commissioner Wustel.
Yeah, just the conversation that we're having here at the end, I do think that that the board was, I guess, a few years back, started down this path about the TOCs, and it just seems to be coming together, I mean, fortunately, with what the PFAS improvements will be. It's good to hear that we have those 3 wells, and we talked about prioritizing the areas that needed that treatment, not doing it across the board because we didn't know if we needed it, but actually focusing in and targeting. And I think that's going to be the strategy that we need going forward. The second thing is that I love the fact that they gave us 5 years, which is probably as long as it's taken to get to these standards, which is just unbelievable to me, because we've been waiting for this and waiting for this and waiting for this. And so that's been at what number, 70? Was that the previous number, 70 parts per trillion?
Yes.
What was the number? Okay, so that's the number that has been an accepted level. This is 4/70ths of that, so it's a lot lower, and we have the 2 or 3 isolated instances that we have to address sooner rather than later, I think. But there is a perspective description, I mean, a visual description that somebody came up with, and I don't remember what it was, but that talked about what that representation is of 4 parts per trillion, and how that equates to people, because this is just words on a paper. So they can help to understand that better. Maybe, is there a descriptive
Yes.
thing? So just it gives people a feel for this.
So as we had described it in the past, is 1 drop of water in 20 Olympic-sized pools. That's what a part per trillion is. 1 drop of water in 20 Olympic-sized pools.
Okay. Again, it's not to diminish the importance of the work and what we're doing. I'm just trying to say that up until recently, 1 month ago or whatever, it was what was it, 20 times that, even though that's still very little, I think, in terms of what we're doing. I just think for perspective, it's important that residents understand kind of where we have been and where we are now, which is dramatically different, and the 2 or 3 wells that we need to attack as quickly as possible so that we don't have this blending to make us feel better, although it does. We can even do better. So anyway, thank you. Appreciate your comment.
Commissioner Westall.
Thank you, and I see some people from Hillsborough here, and since it's only wells in Hillsborough, we went through this before with Mr. Carden, just to reaffirm that all of the drinking water in Hillsborough County is completely safe. There's no need to panic. Get some head nods. I have some head nods. Thank you very much. And to give everyone an idea, when we started first talking about PFAS, I had no idea what it was. I believe the average molecule size is 8 carbon atoms for one molecule of PFAS. I think that's the average size of one. So these are very microscopic, and we are ahead of the curve. We're already almost in line. I'm hoping that we're ahead of a lot of other areas throughout the country. I just don't believe that there's any need for panic. And as far as Commissioner Eggers' opinion that he found it unbelievable that it took this long, I assure you, if there's any institution that can blow something up and not do it right, it's the federal government. So I'm not as shocked at all. So thank you very much.
Commissioner Mariano.
So again, listening to the numbers from 70 down to 4.4, that's got to give you some concern. They're telling you it's okay for all those years that 70 is okay. Now they're down to 4.4. So is that the right number, or is it just the next number they want to go to? Is it going to drop it down again? If there is a way to avoid it, and if that means we have to, let's say, run the desal plant higher to spend more money on that, I'd rather do that than keep on using wells that are bad if it can be avoided. And we should be jumping into that.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, well, we will finish up with your presentation. I think you had
So the fourth and final quarterly samples were collected last month, and laboratory analyses are currently underway. We'll review the fourth quarter and resulting annual average data from our regional delivery locations, as well as the member utility distribution system samples. With this information, we'll know if treatment is needed, and if it is needed, where, how much, and what type of treatment is necessary before we can make a recommendation to this board to invest in treatment. We'll then use the treatment framework from the completed regional water quality study to prioritize and implement treatment as appropriate. We'll then share the fourth quarter findings with member utilities technical staff and provide an update at the next board meeting in July. That concludes the water quality update for today, and I'll be happy to answer any more questions you might have.
I think we're good. Thank you
You're good?
very much.
Thank you.
All righty. We have one more report, and Christina Sackett is going to present that, and that is the fiscal year 2025-2034 capital improvements program funding and upcoming debt financing strategies. That is a mouthful.
Good morning again, Chairman and members of the board. This presentation will provide an overview of the fiscal year 25 through 34 capital improvements program and the agency's anticipated future funding needs, plus present financing strategies that will be evaluated for the upcoming bond issuance. This presentation is for information only, and no board action will be requested today. The fiscal year 25 through 34 capital improvement program currently includes 99 projects and has an estimated total of $1.8 billion in total expenditures. Included in this are the 11 water quality projects for reducing total organic carbon that were estimated to start in 2027 through 2034 and have an estimated total of $452 million in expenditures. These 11 projects were previously put on hold pending the Environmental Protection Agency's final PFAS regulations and the findings from the UCMR 5 testing, which should be completed this summer. Once the testing is complete, the treatment, timing, and costs of these projects will be reevaluated and updated project recommendations will be brought to the board for approval. That leaves 88 capital projects with an estimated total expenditures of $1.3 billion. Here is a breakdown of the 88 projects by type, and as you can see, most of the projects are renewal and replacement projects, followed by studies, then level of service, and reliability. These 4 types of projects account for 78% of the total 88 projects. However, if you look at the projects by cost, 3 level of service projects make up 60% of the total $1.3 billion in cost. The South Hillsborough Pipeline, the surface water treatment plant expansion, and the proposed South Hillsborough well field. This shows the planned funding of the $1.3 billion. 12% will be funded with pay-as-you-go funds, again, such as renewal and replacement, capital improvement, released debt service, and uniform rate funds. 7% with member government joint project agreements. Grants and district co-funding will fund 12%, and 10% will be funded with existing revenue bonds. The remaining 59% will need future funding, for an estimated total of $789 million over the next 10 years. This is the forecast of when the capital improvements program projects will be contracted and their expenditures by fiscal year. Over the next 2 fiscal years, the agency will be entering into about $584 million in project contracts, with 84% of that amount being for the 3 large level of service projects: the pipeline, the surface water treatment expansion, and the proposed South Hillsborough well field. To enter these contracts, the agency needs to obtain about $420 million in additional funding by fiscal year 2025. Here is the anticipated amounts and timing of when the agency would need to take on the new debt totaling $789 million for the $1.3 billion capital improvements program. Because the future funding is needed before the agency's annual debt payments drop significantly in 2032, staff is anticipating and adding smaller amounts of debt every couple of years to minimize the impact on the agency's annual debt service and uniform rate. However, the $1.3 billion does not include the following capital improvement projects. Again, the 11 water quality projects for treating total organic carbon, estimated at $452 million. The potential water quality projects needed for PFAS treatment, which we know will need to be completed within 5 years, but otherwise don't know the timing or the cost, plus the next water supply configuration that may be needed by 2033 and has estimated costs ranging from $0 to over $1 billion. The feasibility studies are currently being conducted over the next few years and will help refine the timing and cost. Until more information is collected and these projects can further be refined, the timing and amounts of these projects are unknown, but they could add another $1 billion or more to the capital improvement program within the next 10 years. This completes the overview of the agency's 10-year capital improvements program and anticipated future funding needs. I would be happy to answer any questions before turning it over to our financial advisors, Nick Roca and Jay Glover, with PFM Financial Advisors, and they will present the financing strategies that will be evaluated for the upcoming bond issuance to mitigate the impact on the uniform rate.
Okay. The commissioners that would want to ask questions, you want to wait until we've heard the presentation, or, okay. We're going to go ahead and hear the presentation and then we'll get to the queue.
I know they're there.
Yeah. Hey, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Almost afternoon, but still morning here. Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm Nick Roca with PFM Financial Advisors, and we're going to be providing you with a brief overview of Tampa Bay Water's outstanding debt, the current municipal market, as well as some initial financing strategies to consider as we move forward with the funding of the capital improvement plan. To start off here, we summarize the authority's outstanding debt by series. We want to highlight the current amount of principal outstanding is $748.5 million. And this debt has a final maturity in fiscal year 2053. And in the column to the right, we describe the refunding status of each series of these bonds. This helps us keep track of when this outstanding debt can be refunded. And then here on the next slide, we have a graphic showing what the authority's annual debt service payment schedule currently looks like. The brown bars, that represents the payment related to the outstanding bonds, while the blue bars at the top there, they highlight the acquisition credits. The outstanding bonds result in a current maximum annual debt service, which is also known as MADS, of $76.5 million in fiscal year 2032. The MADS amount is important as it impacts the authority's uniform rate. And on this slide, I just wanted to spend a quick moment highlighting the current interest rate environment we're in. I know there was a question at the beginning of the meeting about where interest rates are. The graph on the left, this shows the current yield curve that tax-exempt municipal bonds are priced off of, with the solid blue line representing today's rates, and the other dotted lines, those highlight where rates were a week, a month, and a year ago. You will notice that we have been in an inverted yield curve environment over the past year, with short-term rates higher than the rates a few years out. And this is mainly due to the Fed keeping rates elevated due to current economic conditions. The brown bars on the graph on the right, this shows you the 10-year range of rates for each maturity in years 1 through 30. And the dark blue line there, that represents where rates currently are compared to the range over the last 10 years. And the light blue line just below it, that's where rates were a year ago. So you can see kind of similar shape, just a little bit lower than we were at a year ago. So as you can see, rates are currently above their average, but well below the highs we experienced back in October and November of last year. And next, we're going to discuss some initial financing structures for the upcoming funding of the CIP. As Christina previously mentioned, Tampa Bay Water currently has plans to finance $789 million of the $1.33 billion 10-year CIP. On the following slides, we'll discuss some base case scenarios to give you an idea of the impact this will have on the authority's annual debt payments. Note that we have assumed a 30-year term for each of the future financings, as well as a 1 year of capitalized interest and a fully funded debt service reserve fund. Due to us not knowing what the final debt service payments will be for the upcoming 2024 bonds until they are priced later this year, the act of capitalizing 1 year's worth of interest payments allows the financing to not have an impact on the upcoming fiscal year 2025 budget. On this slide, we structured the initial issuance of $420 million of debt on top of the authority's outstanding debt. The green bars show the estimated debt service from the upcoming financing, which would result in a new maximum annual debt service of $99.1 million in fiscal years 2029 through 2032. Note that we have assumed the financing capitalized interest for the first year, so that's why there's no debt service impact shown in fiscal year 2025. Additionally, half of a year of interest falls in 2026, so that's why there's kind of a slight step up in that year from the current debt payment up to the $99 million in annual payments afterwards. On this slide, we've layered on all $789 million of the CIP debt with additional financings in years 2026, 2028, and 2030. Note that when we layer on all the additional debt, we show the maximum annual debt service increasing up to $116.8 million before the debt drops down to around $90.2 million in fiscal year 2033. Important to note, this assumes that we do not refund or restructure any of the authority's outstanding debt. We'll talk through a few different strategies Tampa Bay Water can consider to lower the impact of the authority's maximum annual debt service in the upcoming slides. Moving on here. In this last section, we'd like to briefly mention a few items for consideration that can help provide some budgetary relief for the base case scenarios we just detailed. First, we can work with Tampa Bay Water staff to determine if all $420 million of the initial financing needs to be issued before the end of the year, or if it could possibly be broken up into multiple issuances. For example, if we could split the financing in half and issue $210 million bonds later in April 2025, we estimate the authority could save between $3.5 million alone in interest expense, and that's including net of any additional issuance costs. This strategy could also help Tampa Bay Water's hedge Tampa Bay Water's exposure to the interest rate environment before and after the upcoming election in November. The second item for consideration is restructuring a portion of the outstanding bonds that mature in kind of that pinch point years of fiscal years 2026 to 2032 before we have the drop off in debt service. And we'll discuss that a little more in the next slide. So there are two series of bonds that are maturing, that have bonds maturing in fiscal years 2026 to 2032 that we can look at restructuring to provide budgetary relief in those years. Those include the Series 2015A bonds and the Series 2001A bonds. There are different financing strategies we'll be evaluating with the authority's underwriting team as we move forward towards the 2024 bond financing later this year. And we will work with Tampa Bay Water's finance staff to determine which one is kind of the most advantage to refund these bonds and whether we should refund them with the 2024 bonds or possibly at a later date. So this debt service graphic here is the same as we initially presented earlier, and it includes the 2024 bonds debt service there in green. The difference with this graph is that we highlight where the 2001A bond related debt, which is shown in red, and the 2015A bonds, which is highlighted there in yellow. So you kind of get a visual where those bonds are maturing in consideration of the authority's total outstanding debt. And here we present a scenario that looks at restructuring those bonds to kind of provide you more additional capacity in the early years. So as you can see with this scenario, MADS is reduced nearly $15 million down to $84.2 million. And this scenario assumes we restructured $25 million of the 2001A bonds, and the 2015A bonds are also restructured to solve for level aggregate debt service through fiscal year 2044. And we added there for reference the purple dotted line. So that kind of shows where the annual debt payments would be without any restructuring. And also, as we previously mentioned, we will be working collectively with all of Tampa Bay Water's finance professionals to help determine the most efficient strategy to meet the authority's needs. And to wrap up our presentation, I want to briefly touch on the preliminary financing schedule moving forward. Over the next couple of months, we'll be independently soliciting structuring ideas from Tampa Bay Water's underwriter team for the upcoming 2024 bond financing, along with their thoughts on possible refunding opportunities. At the August 19th meeting, we plan to come back to the board for approval of the 2024 bonds and present the updated financing strategy. By mid-September, we anticipate being in a position to price the 2024 bonds, followed by closing of the financing about a month later in October. With that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have on our materials.
Okay, Commissioner Westall.
Thank you. I noticed the undetermined category for, let me find the page here, for PFAS, I think it was, which I totally understand. So I guess I actually tend to agree with Commissioner Mariano about and I'm curious if in the past, have we ever considered, evaluated, done an analysis on expanding our desal production, or has it just been we've had the one plant and it's never moved on from there?
It has been studied on different master water plans. There's an expansion project over the years to 35 million gallons a day. And so currently it's one of the projects to look at also again in the feasibility study. So yes, is the answer.
Would it be you expanding on the current site or a different facility?
The project that I'm talking about is on the current site.
Okay. Can desalinated water that's generated, I don't know what our pipe network, but does that water supply only facilitate water in the east side of Hillsborough County? I'm assuming that it's too far away to facilitate anything in Pinellas and Pasco, correct?
Well, actually, the desal plant takes water, treats it on site, sends it 16 miles to the regional facility site and blends with the surface water, and then it goes into the north central pipeline that does eventually come around to Pinellas and St. Pete.
Okay, that's interesting. So do we believe that if the costs, we don't have any idea of what the costs to treat PFAS might be at this point?
It depends on what we do. We do have that water quality study that was put on hold. It had 14 treatment plants over a 15-year phasing in of them at almost 500 million. The treatment for the TOC removal is exactly the same as what we're looking at for the PFAS removal. It would just be more of the same, either the granular activated carbon or ion exchange treatments. And so we'd be doing the same thing, but just a bigger treatment footprint. And so nothing different other than the cost will go up. And we wanted to wait to see where we needed to do that with the PFAS results. So that's going to happen this summer, where we're going to look at that, and we'll be meeting with the members. And my goal is to bring back some cost and a plan by the end of this calendar year, the board to consider.
I guess my point is it would be interesting to see, and maybe it's too much of a reach, what the cost benefits are if it really is. We believe that PFAS is coming from the surface water primarily, correct?
Well, we have found some results at the surface water treatment plant. They're just right there under the 4 parts, but that water, comes from the Tampa bypass canal primarily, which has a lot of inputs along the way. So it's under the proposed limits at this time coming out of there, but it's right there at the 4. So we're looking at that site as well.
Okay, I just think it might be interesting to see what the cost benefits are of expansion of more desal at a reduction of others, and if those opportunities do exist, if it turns out to be something just untenable to treat the PFAS going forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Mariano.
Thank you. Years ago, we looked at the desal plant. We could run it at 20 million gallons a day. We ran it at 5 because it was so expensive to run. So I know it's much more expensive to use than surface water treatment. However, the map we just looked at, the previous slide, showed us the red dot. It looks like at the South Hillsborough Wellfield area, right? So have we tested all the wells that we're going to look at putting in this area? Because if you've got your 3 or 4 wells in that area that have PFAS, what makes you think when you put a few more wells in there that you're not going to come up with more PFAS? Somehow I think before we pull the trigger on this, we should be looking at that real close.
Warren.
Commissioner, could you clarify for me, adding additional wells in what location?
All right, so the map we had before, in the previous slide presentation, showed, it looks like, and it's hard for me to read the print, it doesn't say exactly the same word, it looks like South Hillsborough Wellfield.
Okay.
So if we're going to go make this project of $126 million in that same area, do we want to make sure that these wells are not going to be tainted with PFAS as well?
Exactly. We did construct a test well that would be one of the wells for the South Hillsborough Wellfield. And PFAS was one of the suites of water quality constituents we tested for. It was not found, or it was at extraordinarily low levels. I don't believe it was found. The geology is very different in that area. It's a very thick, tight confining layer. Most water from the surface does not percolate down into the Floridan aquifer where we would withdraw water. But you're correct, before we would build a well field, we assure ourselves that we're not going to build in a contamination zone.
So we should check that first before we actually do the proposed well field, the new one. And then before we do the pipeline, shouldn't we be making sure that that project's going to be done before we do the other project as well.
The pipeline to South Hillsborough County is a necessary water treatment or water delivery system. A new well field in that area would also, if selected by the board and cost effective, would be a necessary component to continue to meet growth. Both components could easily be used in South Hillsborough. If we develop a well field in the south, that might free that much regional water to go north to Pasco County, Hillsborough, and Pinellas.
Well, I think Pasco's got a lot of water that we're sending down this way, so I don't know this, I don't see the tie into that effect, but I do think we should just make sure that the well field is gonna be good before even the pipelines worked as well. So I think that research needs to come out. And if it means studying even closer with better data on the PFAS situation, I mean, look at, there's a ton of debt that we're looking at bringing in. I want to make sure it's spent the right way.
Commissioner Eggers. Good. You're good. Anyone, Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what is utility conflict resolution? There's a couple projects listed under that, and I'm just trying to understand what that is.
Again, good morning. So anytime that we have a utility conflict is, for example, a new road is being built by the DOT or any other entity, and underneath the road, we have an existing asset, like a pipeline. So typically, we get notice of those issues, and we determine what improvements need to be done in that particular location, either to relocate or strengthen the road to protect our assets.
So it's relocating infrastructure or making...
Exactly.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you for that. I think it would be helpful for us, my understanding is these projections do not include the water quality projects?
Correct.
So, and I'm sure PFM is going to bring us some good suggestions on how we structure this debt going forward, potentially even including restructuring some debt. At the end of the day, that ultimately leads in paying more interest, but it's something to certainly consider. But I think before we make this decision, we at least need to layer on what those water quality projects would look like as well, at least so we understand long-term, what our ultimate debt structure may need to look like. So I think that would be important for us to make a good financial decision going forward.
I'd like to suggest to Mr. Cardin that perhaps we schedule a workshop concurrent with one of our meetings coming up to actually talk a little bit more in depth about the debt and financing issue. I think these are very complex issues. They have a lot of variables related to them, and almost 3 hours into a meeting is probably the time to say that this is something that really deserves its own slot down the road before we make these August decisions, I think.
Yeah, good plan.
Commissioner Eggers.
I agree 100%. And to Commissioner Scott's point about the water quality study, that the 2033 plan is certainly in our horizon for a new water supply source, as is the 2040 plan. Now, those are getting pretty far out there, but they certainly part of that 30-year horizon that we're talking about. So again, I'm not sure how well you can estimate things in there, but with debt being added in those two water supply projects and debt coming off of our books, it would be nice to see something that just kind of shows us that real long term. But anyway, I agree with you. I think a special session would be helpful. Workshop.
Yes, Commissioner Mariano.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. Some of the things I think we should be taking a look at, what is the projections as far as what the interest rates will be after November? Will they have a chance to go down, or are they going to stay the same? Also, in our county, we had a lot of water projects done for stormwater, and we were told that coming up in the years, SWIFMA was getting away from doing stormwater projects. They were going to go into water creation projects. So I think, I haven't heard anything about SWIFMA working with us for money, so I think that needs to be brought out. Are they going to help? Do we need to go to the state for some of the help? Can the state help with some of the PFAS money? All that should be looked at. Are we going to get help from the state? And will that be part of the presentation coming up as well?
Yeah, I can outline, we've been very aggressive with the state and the federal looking for money. The district has changed their rules there. They're really not, got a lot of funds that they have in the past. But we also, I don't want to get into too many details, but we also are part of the settlement for the litigation on PFAS that is coming up, I believe, this summer. So, yes, I will be happy to bring back all of the variables and we can have a nice discussion.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. We are going to move on to the one administrative matter that we're going to take up today, and that is the adoption of a virtual attendance policy. Ms. Fernandez, our general counsel, will lead us off in that discussion.
Sure. I think this will be rather brief, but one of the things I've identified since joining is that there is not a policy either one way or the other allowing or prohibiting virtual attendance by board members. So as you all are probably aware, you need to have a quorum physically present, but beyond that, you can allow members to attend virtually under certain circumstances. So I'm simply seeking, so it's not a case-by-case basis determination whether you all wish to allow virtual attendance, and if so, under what circumstances, and I can bring that back as a policy, or you can choose not to allow virtual attendance. That would be fine too.
Okay, I'm going to open this up for board discussion, but before I do, I would like to just say that a lot of us serve on multiple boards. Different boards have different policies related to this, but it's been my observation that it would be helpful to have a policy. The policy, in my view, ought to not require a board member to give a reason. That as long as we have a physical quorum and they give us notice that they're not going to be here, and the policy, the ability to do this is not abused, not done more than once or twice a year, I think it would be a good idea to have it. The only other thing I would add is that a person should not chair the meeting, I think, remotely. I think the chair ought to be in the room. So if the chair is going to be absent, the person could participate in the meeting, but the vice chair, who would be in the room, would actually chair it for that session. But if anybody else has any thoughts on that, let's go ahead and discuss it. Commissioner Wastel, and then move around.
I'm not going to say too much just because this is the only board that's actually close to my house, despite me living in a different county. So for me, it's no problem to be here. For the people in Pasco, I mean, they, of course, might have to drive a long way, so I understand it. Actually, Commissioner Cohen and I do sit on a different board, and it was being abused, in my opinion, and that board took action, and then they made it to where if you attended remotely, you could not vote. You could attend, but you could not vote. So I'm really fine with anything, but while I do give weight to the fact that we're all adults and elected officials, I have seen it abused, and so that's something to take into consideration, and I really will support whatever you all want.
Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, I think there, again, we can have this discussion later, but I mean, if you're the chair and you've got one person versus four people weighing in, it makes it a much more difficult meeting to manage, getting folks' input. So maybe we can talk about limiting it in that regard. The other thing is that, in Pinellas County, we do have the ability to do it, but we also limit the reason that you can do it. I think it's important to the issue of abusing. Like, I just don't feel like it. I think I'll stay home today. Or, I'm thinking I'm going to stay home today, so let me get approval on this ahead of time. That's not a good reason for not being here. There could be reasons. Could be really good reasons. Could be you're sick but not sick enough. You could be, I think if you're on vacation, you're just on vacation. They shouldn't be checking in and working that way. So I do think the reasons for that approval are important. And I would try to limit those reasons to fewer rather than more, and having it unlimited, because it is good. And I'm going to keep saying that message, to be here collegially working together. So I can see Councilmember Miranda and his facial expressions when I'm speaking. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh, I got a neck problem.
Yeah. But I think it's good to have us all here. So I'd like to minimize the use of the excuses used to do that. Thank you.
Commissioner Oakley.
I'm in agreement with you about limited to certain excuses. I missed one meeting this year because I was sick. I wouldn't have attended for Zoom if I was sick. I wouldn't be there anyway. But, and I drive probably the furthest of anybody here, and I'm most of the time first being here. But that's just me. If I'm early, I'm on time. If I'm on time, I'm late. And that's the way I see things. But I do not like Zoom meetings. I like meetings in person, and I think they're very, very much, and I believe people, this is a very important board for this region, and I think it's very important to be here.
Yes.
It hasn't been a problem before, so I guess someone wants that.
Well, I think the issue is that we have no policy at all. So when the executive director is asked, can I do it? He says, I have no idea. We can also prohibit it. We don't have to do it, but it's something
no
that we.
policy at all has worked very well.
Okay, Councilwoman Hanowitz.
Yeah, I mean, when this issue was brought up to me, my first question is, what issue are we fixing? I mean, if you're going to put a rule, you're fixing something. I know I missed the last 2 meetings, but I've been on this board for 2.5 years, and everyone knows I've been diligent to be here. You know, I had spring break with my daughter, and we were traveling one month, and then the other one, it happened my brother-in-law's 50th, and it was out of the country. So those things happen. We're all adults here, but if we're going to have a rule, it's because we're fixing something. I am concerned about abuse. And I do believe there's intrinsic value into us being here in person. I think this is a very good board, and I'm just not someone that wants to have a policy just because, unless you need it. So,
well, I do think we should have a policy, regardless of what the policy says. I think we should have some policy. It can be that it's not allowed, and it could also be that it's allowed under very certain circumstances, under very limited discussion. It sounds like there is not an appetite for a wide-ranging policy that allows lots of remote participation.
And I will add to that, you know, this is driven by case law, by statute, by attorney general opinions. We serve on different boards, whether it's county, municipalities, and right now this is a special district. So the rules are different. Right now, what I have on paper is just a summary. It doesn't really go into a lot of the detail in terms of what we would do and how we would do this. So if we are going to consider something, I would expect a more robust analysis of if there were extraordinary circumstances, what are the times that you use it, and so on and so forth. So that's what I will add to that. Thank you.
Let me go to Commissioner Mariano, and then we'll bring it back.
Yeah, years ago, we had the Gulf Consortium with COVID going on, et cetera, and I had a strong thing to where I thought everybody should be in person, because the calls that were coming in were very disruptive. It was like hard to hear somebody, feedback, et cetera. The technology has improved so much dramatically. When you're going on like a big state organization, having everybody to come to one location was costly, time-consuming, and just hard to get quorums sometimes, even though it was such big issues. I'll say regional planning council's been doing them. I haven't seen the abuse. They've been making quorum. I think sometimes if you're sick, like right now, David Allen, our public works guy, is listening, but he's not here. He didn't want to be, because he was sick, didn't want to come. He was so sick enough that he didn't want to spread anything to anybody, but healthy enough to listen. I think it's an opportunity that I want him to be able to listen. Now, he doesn't participate, but last month I had a family thing to take care of, and just being remote, I thought I could listen in, which was okay. But I thought maybe it would have been better if I could have participated a little bit more by not being here. As an elected official, you have so many meetings that you have going back and forth. You sacrifice the meeting to not go with your family. If there's a big family thing going on that you want to go to, that you can't go to, I think it's careful that you maybe put it in for, you can't do it more than twice a year or something. But I think that's consideration that's worthy, especially with technology available, to make it still a productive meeting, but allow for the flexibility. Time-wise, an hour and 15 minutes back and forth, depending on traffic, hour depending on what goes on, depending on where you're at, where you got to go next. As a time thing, You know, it's pretty valuable time that you've got. You only got so much of it. So I think it'd be more productive if you allow a little more flexibility. And I think we should have a policy as well. So I think it's good for discussion for down the road coming up.
Commissioner Scott, and then I'll move.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think having a virtual policy that allows virtual participation is a good thing, but I would limit it to twice a year. I mean, we all serve on a lot of boards and we all get pulled in a lot of directions. So having some flexibility, I think, would be a good thing.
Mayor?
I think it's a real important board here, and to eliminate any abuse. I think if you're welcome to join in on a Zoom meeting but not vote. I think that might force you to want to be here once you've seen the agenda, if you really want to vote.
So it sounds to me like there really is not consensus on the board for what the policy ought to be. And so I'd like to, in the interest of time, make this suggestion that we just table this item for the moment, bring it up at our next meeting. Everyone will have had a chance to think about it. And perhaps if anyone wants to at that time, they can make a motion. Commissioner Oakley?
I'd just like to say that our votes are very important, and if you're not going to be at this meeting and not vote, if you're going to have many of those, and if you're part of, and I'm the chairman of my commission, I'm not going to pick you to be on this board because I want you here for your vote, because I think for the future of water in our region is very, very important. And this group, of all groups that I've been a part of, work better together, being here together. So
okay,
just make that statement.
Yes, Ms. Hanowitz.
And if we are going to have an additional discussion, it may help to have a more in-depth analysis as to what the requirements are legally. I do believe there are differences depending on what type of boards, and there are different legal requirements in terms of quorum and all that. So that may be helpful.
Okay, so perhaps our general counsel can bring us some additional information, and we'll also perhaps have some examples at hand of what some of the other boards in our region are doing. And we certainly have some examples that we can choose from. With that, is there any other new business to take up today?
Just receive and file. Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilman Miranda with a second from Commissioner Eggers. Please record your vote.
Mr. Chair, the motion passed unanimously.
And just a reminder, everyone, there is not a June meeting. Our next meeting is July 15th, 2024 at 9:30 a.m., and we will expect everyone here in person. We're adjourned.
Good to see you.